review. It doesn't mean that these projects will not continue. It's just that the President Trump wants to make sure that all of these projects are aligned to U.S. foreign policy. And if we base this on the discussions that we've had with U.S. leaders, no, members of the Trump administration, as I mentioned early, is that in my opinion, all of the projects that the U.S. are doing here are aligned with U.S. Foreign policy, especially the question of does this assistance strengthen the United States, or does it make the United States more secure? And I think all of their projects here make the United States more secure.
I think probably it also has to do with the cultural wars and issues there. Maybe Trump administration is just making sure yung pera hindi na pupunta sa mga woke projects, as they call it, right? It's not really about, MAGA, we don't care about the world. So you're saying it's not an isolationist thing, it's just kind of a reassessment of some basic alignment in terms of America's spending abroad, because this is taxpayers' money for Americans, so it should be understandable. Again, I'm saying this because we have friends who are making mountain out of this. And sinasabi na, paano na yung mga budget ng mga bayaran ng Amerika? May mga nagpapatawa. Sabi, kamusta naman China? Medyo nag-shrink yung economy. Baka naman. Last point, and then I want to open it up. Commentary, of course, your PhD was from Japan. Philippine Coast Guard has absolutely great relationship with Japan. Japan played a very important role in modernization of our Coast Guard. What do you have to say about the other important players in light of the fact that we had an RRA ratified with Japan, the French are coming in, and I think people forget, actually a lot of Japanese systems are
as a Secretary of State in 2019. That was the first time that the U.S. government clarified that the mutual defense treaty can be applied in the South China Sea. So, Trump has been like that since Trump 1.0 during his first administration. So ngayon, he can say whatever he wants, but with the cabinet members that are in place right now. And I'm also a believer that United States is a mature democratic country. There are democratic institutions in place that will not allow the U.S. government to deteriorate from being protector of the rules-based order that we all enjoy. And without going into the details kasi alis si Justice Carpio, I would also like to highlight that the transparency effort of the Philippine government is also anchored in protecting our interests na hindi tayo dependent sa isang bansa lamang. The transparency initiative that we're doing is to create awareness to the international partners who are protector of the rules-based order. We have to make sure that across Europe, Japan, Australia, and the entire world, to include India, that there is this one country that is intentionally and blatantly violating the international law. I've always been mentioning this. The transparency efforts allow the international community to understand that our fight in the West Philippine Sea is not just for us Filipinos. It's not just for our own sovereignty. It is a fight for everybody that wants to preserve the rules-based order. Otherwise, we're going to go back to the system before the First and Second World War that might justify whatever actions that they can do. And that is what we're doing right now. The mere fact that we launched transparency efforts 2 years ago, marami ng bansa ang makipag-ugnayan sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, Philippine Coast Guard, to deepen our security cooperation and to support our modernization efforts for the military. We can now hear from Germany, France, United Kingdom, and Canada as well. Even the Indian government is also supporting our efforts. And that's another positive impact of the Transparency Initiative.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that clarification and a more positive note under the Trump 2.0 administration. Now, because Justice has to go a little bit ahead, the rest will still stick around a little bit. Siguro yung mga ibang kaibigan natin sa media, if they have questions that has to do with the legal aspects of the West Philippines and disputes, or even the strategic aspects, are there any questions or any reactions? Or
Yeah, I think we have to Okay, programa ang planning po dito sa kanya sa kanyang
registering
tahanan. Okay,
late birth registrations with
okay,
the
sa kanyang mainstay
with the register of
14 years
civil registrar.
Namayagpag, no?
If there is a late registration, it should not be the sole authority of the civil registrar to approve it. It should go to, let's say, DOJ or some other body, just to make sure that there is a counter-checking mechanism, because you've seen a lot of late registration.
Okay, sabi po ng mga political pundits, no?
As that's
Okay,
the
dito sa
entry of a lot of Chinese
Metro
aliens
Manila,
getting
yung mga
Filipino
magagaling
citizenship. So I think that has to be
nakagawa
certain.
ng balita,
It
no?
cannot be the
Sa US,
civil registrar
sa
himself who
ibayong
will
dagat,
decide
sa
that
iba-ibang
this late registrant should
lupalop
be
ng
approved.
daigdig, no?
It has to be another body just to counter-check.
Okay, sinasabi itong si President
And for
Donald
that,
Trump,
ang ano natin dyan is,
tinatawag,
there is
tinagurian po ng
smoke,
deal
there is
maker.
flame. So we do not
Deal maker,
downplay
mga
any
no?
report that is given to the armed forces of the
Okay.
Philippines. Ang AFP is just one of the
Yan
players
po ang
in
tawag
this.
sa
So if we
kanya,
look at this, we
deal
have to
maker.
approach it
Ayun ang
in a whole of
pumapipile,
government
bakit naging,
approach.
deal maker, no?
So if you look at all of this
Pero
money
yung
improvements,
mga
all of this parts and
world
bits and
leader,
pieces that form part of a grand
okay,
plan.
yung mga
Tumutulong
world
ang
leader
lahat
ay
ng iba't
doesn't
ibang
like
ahensya
him, no?
rito. So tinitingnan natin dito,
Okay.
katulad nitong huling
nagkaproblema
national
rin
na
ang mga leader po sa
iniimbestigahan
daigdig,
natin,
no? Sa kanyang,
he got his
polisiya,
citizenship because he
domestic
married a
policy.
Filipina. So nasa
Okay,
batas
first
kasi din
American
natin yun, no?
massacre,
So yun yung nagamit
Yung hindi
for legality
imbalance
of
ba?
that. So what we look
Ang
into on the side of the
pagtrato
AFP
ng,
are
sa
national
ibang bansa, mga
security
Pilipino.
implications.
So,
So yun yung sa
meron
side
parang,
namin. That's why we are fortifying our units to have this
global grievance.
intelligence command and
Global
cyber command.
grievances.
Kasi nga, ito na
Kaya
yung
natin
modern
puro
na
mga suki, no?
warfare that we're facing. So
Global
we also have
grievances.
to marry, no,
Ayaw
yung
nila
efforts
po
ng
sa-
ating AFP into
Okay,
the
palakad
contemporary
po ng
modern
itong,
challenges that we
Presidente
face.
Donald Trump, no?
So ito, hindi
Sa
kaya ng
kanyang,
AFP, ito lang. But
deal maker.
together with all other agencies.
Okay, isa
Kasi
raw
nga,
sa mga dahilan
Bureau of
nitong
Immigration,
pagtanggap niya
kasama
ng,
dito, no, di ba? Pati
TikTok
nga po
na
yung
yawan po
mga
ng
mga
suki,
birth
no?
certificates and all, they're
Okay,
all
so,
part of this. So, hindi
paano
siya isang part lang po ang AFP to
kwarta
this.
itong
No?
mga
So it's, we have
negosyo
to have
ito.
great alliances also
500
with the different agencies on
billion
this.
US dollar
And
deal po mga sa
for
mga
this,
kababayan, no?
nakita natin na
Yung
naging
TikTok.
mapanuri na nga tayo
TikTok.
ngayon as we keep saying that
kailangan lang sumunod
security
po sa,
is everyone's responsibility.
kagustuhan
Hindi lang
po
din
ng,
government ito, but bawat mamamayang
pag-business.
Pilipino. So
Pagputa
hindi
business
namin
po sa Amerika.
maisantabi na malaking tulong po yung reports na
billion
binibigay
US
ng ating
dollar
mga
po ang
kababayan
proportion.
for us to really closely look into
Okay.
this. And kung meron
mga
pang report
bilyonaryo,
na matanggap ang AFP,
kaya-
actionan namin ito.
Yung tinatawag ko mga
Um,
dark
there's a disproportionate
Okay,
focus based on
billionaires
our
sa likod
intelligence
ng,
that certain
Trump,
demographics are being
pansip
targeted.
na nito, 500 million
Should
sa
we
mga
work
mayaman
with
sa
community
US, no?
leaders there?
Ayan.
Because
Yan
as we
ang
speak, there are community leaders who are
Just,
saying, "Oh, don't target us and
inayawan
all."
po
So
ng,
maybe the logical solution is
ibang
let's just work
leaders sa
together so that it doesn't come off as if we're targeting the whole community.
European
We're just
Union,
trying to look at the rotten apples here and there.
Yes or no? So, this is all part of
At
this.
saka
No?
ibang
So,
continent po ng mundo,
yung
no?
Transparency Initiative,
Ayan.
sa amin sa AFP po, we
Kanyang,
came up with our communications
deal maker
plan.
policy.
No? Meron tayong complan mulat. So, kasama yan.
So,
We really go
ibig
down
sabihin,
to
magaling
to the levels of even our
hanap po
fishermen.
ng,
Kinakausap natin yan.
pagkakitaan itong si-
Kaya nga, itong mga
Okay.
part ng drones, ngayon,
Allegedly,
nire-report na
no?
nila.
Itong si
No?
Donald
So, through all of
Kaya
this,
nga,
yung
yung mga
huling
world
lumabas
leader ay-
was a previous incident pa.
Siyempre,
Dahil
interest
nakita
nila
nga
ay
niya na
apektado mga
ito na
suki, no?
malaking
Mga
usapin na
world
to. Na yung
leaders,
dati, hindi naman
okay,
nila
apektado
nire-report
po ang
because
kanilang
these are
interest.
small incidents lang.
Ayan.
Ngayon, they also see a bigger
Hindi
picture to
sa-
this. So,
hindi
mas
batas
malawak
po
na rin yung
pagkatrato
understanding ng
ng
bawat
kasalukuyan
Pilipino,
ng
no? And yung
47
concern nila
President ng
to be
United
part of
States
this.
of America,
So, ang
no?
gusto talaga din natin dyan is to
Kapakanan ng
ignite the
Amerika,
patriotism
yung
of the
kapakanan ng
Filipino
iba.
and the nationalism of
Ayan.
every Filipino
Katulad
to
na
be
lang itong
part of
mga tarik.
this conversation as a group.
Reklamo po itong Canadian government,
Sorry,
President po
Philippine
ng
Coast Guard.
Canada,
And another
then
question.
Mexico, okay, China, ayan.
Sasaki
Ayaw
from the
talaga
Kyoto
mga
News,
suki mga bayan,
Japanese.
no?
I
Itong,
wish to ask
Nasa unang
Tungkol po sa
tanong tungkol dun sa
So, halos sa buong mundo ay
insidente sa Palawan.
buong
Yes.
bansa ay nag-oppose
We
po
have
sa
been coordinating very
magpapatong
closely
pa ng
with our
25%
intelligence services,
sa mga
with
goods.
the Philippine National Police, the
Papasok
National
po
Bureau
sa
of
Amerika
Investigation, and
mo yun.
all
Napakalaki yun,
law enforcement
25%.
agencies of government.
Okay,
Gaya nga
and
nung
then,
sinabi ko kanina, because there will be
Doliares
announcements here
Kawawa po
in the
ang
next
mga
few days.
producer.
No?
Manufacturer
Was siguro what I can say
manufacturing
right now
company
is
magpapasok
that
po ng,
there will be more arrests,
ng produkto
and
po
this
sa US,
includes
mga
what
suki,
happened
no?
there in Palawan.
Automatic po ay
Because
pabatawan po
we
ng
have ramped up our
25%
counterintelligence efforts.
tariff.
And because of that,
Okay, kaya
we're
nga may
slowly
trade war ngayon,
unraveling
mga suki, no?
the conspiracy,
Okay, dito ng Amerika,
this
at saka mga
operation
ating,
that being
mga,
done by foreign actors
bansa.
to
tulad
conduct
sinabi mo,
espionage in the
Canada,
Philippines. No?
Mexico,
Ayoko lang
China,
pangunahan ang National Bureau of
at saka
Investigation
ibang
and
bansa
the
po,
Department of
yung iba
Justice.
silent lang.
But
Silent
yes,
lang
we
muna
are
po.
aware.
Pero ayaw
In
nila
fact,
yun. Kasi
we are
pabigat po.
part of the team that's
Pag
looking into
mag-produce
this,
ka ng
and
goods,
that we
and then,
expect more arrest in the coming days,
i-export mo
because
sa Amerika,
you know when you have this type of
25%
individual
agad
arrested,
po
this leads to
patong
another
ng,
individual to
carry
another
bags,
individual,
mga
no? Because these are all
Ayan.
cells,
Sa
so to speak.
energy, may 10%
As to the other
ang proposal
question,
po ng,
the Typhoon
Okay,
missile
sa
system, I think
Lubigan po,
the Philippine government has made very clear its position
dealmaker,
that
tinatawag po ng dealmaker,
the presence
yung si
of the
President Donald
Typhoon
Trump, no?
missile system in the
So, patay po ang
Philippines
ibang mga
is
negosyante,
was part of
Okay,
course of the
kalaki po
Balikatan
ng,
exercises. So the purpose of that
bilang,
was to
trading partner,
train
itong
Filipino
Amerika at saka
troops
ibang
in
dating
utilizing
mga
this. It is
So,
not for
mga multi lahat,
offensive
mga
purposes. No, it is
sa kanya
primarily
ginawa po
for
pag,
defensive purposes
taas
and
po
to
ng,
ensure that the Philippines
taxes,
has
mga
capacity to
Direct tax.
operate such
Ang gusto
weapon
kasi ni
system.
Donald Trump,
And the Philippines
gusto mo
has
negosyo,
expressed
punta ka
its
sa
interest to
Amerika,
buy these types of
and then
systems.
doon ka
In the same
mag-produce.
manner that we bought the
Okay,
BrahMos
mag,
missile system,
ano, mga
in the same
services.
manner that we're getting
Doon ka
other
sa
types
Amerika,
of
mga
weapon
concept ng
systems.
business mo.
The Typhoon is just one of
mag-expand ng
those
business mo. Bigyan ka
tools
ng
that we can use to
privilege.
strengthen our
Okay, sa
comprehensive
mga
archipelagic defense
reglamento
concept.
ng
And very
US,
clearly,
business
it is
sa
for
US
defensive
na mababang,
purposes. No? So,
okay.
as mentioned by the armed forces,
Mga suki, no?
this is a sovereign act.
Pero
This is a
kailangan doon ka
decision of the Philippine government,
okay,
and it is
magagawa
not meant
ng,
for any other state. It
produkto
is
mo sa
for
Amerika, doon ka may
the
maging manufacturing
territorial integrity of the
company
Philippines.
sa Amerika.
And quite rich for China to talk about nuclear
Kaya
as
one
well,
side,
their
mga
nuclear
suki, mga
submarines,
kababayan,
and
karamihan
they're doing
na
intercontinental
political
ballistic
politics
missile
na
tests last
Trump.
September and all.
Okay,
From the AFP
one-sided,
perspective, and then I want to go also to Justice Scorpion,
kalakalan
this
mga
big
suki,
question.
no? Wala kang kalaban-laban.
For that note,
Ayan po
na-mention
ang,
naman ni Sir, it's all part of the comprehensive
inayawan po
archipelagic
ng
defense concept.
world leaders.
What
Okay,
what we
kay
do
Donald Trump,
in
no?
terms of
So,
fortifying
ikaw
our
mag-isa, halimbawa,
defenses
ikaw
is a
mag-isa.
sovereign act of the Philippines.
Kaya mo kaya ang
And
problema ng
kasama
daigdig?
lahat yan, no? Is are all
kaya ka ni
interconnected to one
President
another.
Donald Trump?
Our CADC
mag-isa lang siya mag-solve
is
ng
connected
problema
to
ng
our
daigdig.
modernization projects.
Ewan ko na lang,
It's
mga
connected
suki,
to the laws that are
Kaya
being
nga.
passed, yung
Okay,
lumabas
dapat
na
kasi-
about our archipelagic sea lanes,
Okay,
our
ay maging,
SRDP. So lahat po ito
patas
is,
po sa
is
lahat
all
ng
connected
nasuki,
to one another. So
yung palig po ng democracy,
whatever we
patas po
do
nasuki, mga
in terms of fortifying our defenses
Walang
is
diktahan.
for us to determine and to put into play
Bahala ka sa
without
buhay
any
mo.
external
Polisiya po ng
entity
democracy,
dictating
mga
how we would do it.
kababayan, no? So after
Justice
4
Scorpio, how do you
years,
see
yan
the
po mga
whole
kababayan,
Typhoon drama?
magpalit naman ng,
Do you think the Philippines should push
leader
for
ng
acquisition of those weapon systems? Do you think we're making the Chinese rightfully nervous about this?
deal maker,
What should be the big
President,
grand strategy on this front, if I may say?
kambuyan President Donald Trump.
Well,
So yan
we're
po
just
unang
following
komentaryo
what China
natin.
did to the
Okay,
US.
sa umagang ito,
The Chinese,
magbalik na ako ng
to,
hangin mga
to
suki, no? Okay, so
prevent
tandaan
the
nyo,
Americans from
47% of
sailing
United
the
States
South
of
China
America,
Sea, they developed
he is
their
a deal maker.
Daofeng
Ayan po.
DF-21, 22 missiles,
Puro kwan
and
lang.
that could target
Puro
the
favor po
aircraft
sa kanya.
carriers 1,000 kilometers away.
Sa
And
kanilang interest po ang
that
gusto
is the
nila, mga
asymmetrical defense.
Eh, hindi naman pwede po sa
Very expensive to
Okay, sa
have
Germany, sa mga
aircraft
Europe,
carriers to develop
sa
aircraft carriers. So
France,
with this
mga sa ng malaking ekonomiya
far
rin
cheaper
natin, no? Okay,
missiles, you can
UK,
deter the aircraft carriers from entering the South China Sea. We also cannot manufacture warships. They're very expensive. It's cheaper to have BrahMos missiles or Typhoon missiles
Yan po ang opinion
to
natin sa
serve as
mga ito.
deterrent. This is a matter of
Okay.
deterrence, really.
Komentaryo.
We cannot hope to invade China with this. We cannot hope to defeat China with this. We can if there is a nuclear attack on us,
Okay,
then the Americans will be obliged legally to
Sorry po.
support us, and the only way
Ayan.
to
Kaya yung
international
nagsasabi
law,
sa akin na
you have to
metal-metal
retaliate
and ang
with the
utak,
same
hindi po
force
mga Pilipino.
that was used against you.
Kaibigan natin
So if it's a nuclear attack, you can
nasabihan
respond
niya
by
ako
a
ay
nuclear attack.
metal-metal, mga
That's
kababayan.
automatic
Hindi
under
po
the
empty-handed.
Mutual Defense Treaty.
Empty
It's
mind.
because
Ang inyong,
mutual defense means you
tagapagbalita
can
po ng,
respond proportionately
ng,
to the gravity of the
kung ano
attack.
ng topic dito. Hindi
Are there other questions?
mas malakas ata ako magbasa ng libro.
We
sa inyo.
more proactively call out certain questionable behavior, perceptions, narratives, because I think we have to be honest that I mean,
Okay.
the Philippines is for me in a kind of a double Cold War. Right?
Yung,
One is we're caught in between U.S. and China. But the other one is that there are two major coming elections. I know our government people cannot say much about that, but I'll start with you, Justice Scarpio. How should we navigate this kind of a two-level Cold War of U.S.-China competition and Duterte administration, or Duterte versus Marcos kind of competition as we head into these elections? Because my sense is could be the first election whereby TikTok will play a very important role. We saw that in the U.S. with the swing voters going for MAGA. We saw that in Indonesia with proposed elections last year. But also, I think this is the election where we'll see a lot of discussion on West Philippines issue. We're already seeing surveys, no? Na boboto ba kayo sa mga pro-China candidates? We never had surveys like that before, right? Now we can have even... So that means that the tenure, the cadence, the trajectory of conversations is getting more serious because we're in a very serious situation. I think people are not realizing what's happening to us is not just normal espionage activities. This is like Berlin of the 21st century. I don't want to scare people, but I think we have to realize we are at the very front line of big tectonic movements in terms of geopolitics. Justice Scarpio, maybe some final notes on that, and then also what are the things we should do moving forward, especially with elections coming in and things getting very hotted in the Philippines. Yeah.
Well, there is only one country in the world that is invading us using use of force or threat of force, and that's China. It's invading our maritime zones, it's invading our island territories in the West Philippine Sea. And there is only one country that is able to support us, to help us deter China, and that's the US. So it's very clear where we should ask for help. We should be our ally in this struggle to defend the West Philippine Sea. So, and in the Philippine context, you have families here. One family is allied with China, another family is allied with the US, and that is how it's being played now. So, at the moment, we are forced to ally ourselves with our former colonial master because our colonial master has no more territorial or maritime designs on our territory. It's China that has territorial and maritime designs on our territory. So I think the choice is obvious. We have to defend our maritime zones and our island territories. That's the first obligation of a state to defend its territory, because without territory you don't have a state. And that's the way I look at it. We really have no choice but at this point to have the US as our ally, because it's the only nuclear armed country that's willing to defend us against a nuclear armed China.
So avoid false equivalence. Just quick point, Justice Scarpio. Obviously, you know, you and I have not been shy of being critical of governments throughout different administration. Even when you were inside government, you were critical. I think in media, in academia, we're always trained to be basta kung anong position ng government, dapat we have to check it to balance it. I'm not not saying that we shouldn't criticize the government, but do you think it is also important for people to realize that we need to have, I hate to use this word, unity more than ever, right? Considering the urgency of the situation we're facing. That's why I use the term whole of nation. Whole of nation doesn't mean that we'll just be okay with whatever happens with the government. But whole of nation is also this basic understanding na may mga bagay kung saan talaga dapat magsama-sama tayo. And may mga bagay na talaga you have to have private-public partnership and civil society has to work in tandem. I mean, this conversation is very much multi-sectoral, right? Not only interagency. What do you have to say about that, Justice? Because you're the most experienced person here. You have straddled government, civil society, and academia throughout the years.
Well, as I said, I think the government now, the incumbent administration, is on the right path, right policy as far as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. I mean, we just have to tweak some of the strategies and the tactics, but it's on the right path. We have to assert the arbitral award, we have to defend our island territories, and we have to strengthen our alliances with the U.S. and like-minded states. And we must invite our allies to sail in the West Philippine Sea, because by sailing the West Philippine Sea, they're actually enforcing the arbitral award. And we are on the right track, but we have to tweak some of these things because, like for example, arbitration, there's a reluctance to file an arbitration case now. We have to convince the government to do that. Thank you.
So proactive. Commodore Tariela, final word.
Minsan nagugulat ako kay Richard pag biglang ako na yung tatanungin, sir. Well, I think West Philippine Sea is the most unifying issue that we have right now. And the 2025 midterm election, para sa akin, this will be a litmus test on how unified the Filipinos are when we talk about the West Philippine Sea issue. Noong mga nakaraang eleksyon, we never ask accountability among the candidates how they stand or how they view the issue in the West Philippine Sea. But because of the transparency effort of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, under the leadership of General Eduardo Año, we were able to awaken the sense of patriotism ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino. They were also asking like how ordinary Filipinos can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. I think this coming election, this is the best way that you can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. We have to make sure that those members of the legislative branch that we're going to elect, whether in the Senate or in the Congress, are those people who will be supporting President Bongbong Marcos in standing firm with his commitment of not surrendering a square inch of our territory to any foreign power. Huwag na tayong magboto ng mga kandidato na pro-China at susuport at hindi susuporta sa modernisasyon ng Armed Forces of the Philippines at ng Philippine Coast Guard. It will be very difficult for the AFP and for the Coast Guard, for BFAR and other government agencies to support our annual budget kung ang ilalagay natin sa Kongreso ay ang mga miyembro ng Kongreso at Senado na never really cared about our fight in the West Philippine Sea. So, the most important and patriotic contribution that you can do for our fight in the West Philippine Sea are elect members of the legislative branch who will be supporting our government in not surrendering a square inch of our territory. Thank you.
And Mr.
Arking premise is our right is our might. So ang sabi nga ni Jay, no, ang uniting factor ng Filipinos ngayon is the usapin ng West Philippine Sea. And with that, no, as we shift from the AFP, from the internal security operations to territorial defense, ito na yung nagiging focus natin. When we say territorial defense, it's not an outside entity coming in, but we're looking at the Trojan horse inside and trying to look at kung ano yung mga different factors that contribute to a greater grand plan, no? Kung ano lahat ito. And as the election season comes in, no, ito may malaking usapin dyan is our BARM elections, which is a historical feat for the Philippines. And we're looking at any influence that will hamper the peaceful conduct of this. So, kasama lahat yan sa lahat ng tinututukan natin. And with this, bawat mamamayang Pilipino, parte tayo dyan as we exercise our constitutional right to have our voice be heard and have a stake on who will be leading us into our future, no? ito lahat, we do not lose focus on the bigger challenge and the bigger picture out there. Kung ano man itong mga nangyayari internally, let's look at how it is connected to the influences that you have with the bigger challenges we have. And as one Filipino nation, no, kung ano man yan, pinupush natin na for the rest of this natin, no, mga kababayan natin na nalihis ng landas to come back to the folds of the law, and together we fight a bigger challenge, which is territorial defense. And so, ang laging binabanggit ng AFP po dyan is, ito po ang ating karagatan, ito ang ating karapatan, at ito ang ating kinabukasan. This is our seas, our rights, and our future. So alamin natin ito, atin itong ipaglaban, at atin itong suportahan.
Yusek Malay?
Sabi ko, actually,
Female voice.
Mariela for Senator.
Male voice. Valley
Matagal ko na
voice.
itong sinasabi eh. And
Monster
medyo
voice.
disappointed ako nung dumaan yung filing ng candidacy. Hindi nag-file ang aking senador. So, pagpasensya na natin hanggang Coast Guard na lang siya. For now. Well, just very short.
Okay,
lang
hanap tayo
ito.
sunod
I just
na
want to thank
balita.
the Filipino
Okay,
people
mga
for the
suki, mga-
overwhelming support. 84% of the public in the latest
maniwala sa
Purpose
mukha mga-
survey show that 85% of the Filipino people support the Philippine government's position on seeking for rights and diversity. And as I mentioned, bakit hindi 100%? It's because we're not a authoritarian state. We're not authoritarian. We are a democracy. And 84% sa ibang bansa, napakalaki na yan. Sila, meron na sila 55%, 56%, yung tuwa na sila. That's already a vast majority. But us to have 84% in one of the largest countries in the world, with a large population, to have that kind of critical mass supporting government is a really big thing. That is because of people like you, Richard, and my colleagues here in government who continue to fight the good fight for God and country. Maraming salamat.
Okay, pakinggan natin po current state
Thank
of
you very much.
Philippine fintech, yung financial technology sector, things to look forward to in 2025 mga suki. Pakinggan natin ito, no? Napakahalaga ito sa mga sa mga digital transaction ang fintech.
Etong issue ng espionage, malign influence, unauthorized ISR, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'll ask first
so pakinggan
Colonel
natin,
Padilla about this. What are the facts of the case in terms of yung etong mga espiya daw na nahuli ng gobyerno at sinasabi ng mga ibang eksperto at saka yung sinasabi ng ibang like Senator Riza for instance na may kinalaman din ito sa Pogo. So these are issues that we have been discussing na are Pogo's nests for espionage. Senator Lacson was raising that back in 2019, etc. What are the facts of the case and should we look forward towards certain big developments also in the coming days? So the degree that you can share. Thank you, Colonel.
Yes, sir. This is an ongoing investigation, no? So hindi ko pwede i-deal itong facts of the case in detail, so to speak. But generally, kung ano naman talaga yung what the public has already seen, no? This was a joint operations between the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the NBI. And nakita natin dito nga na may kahina-hinalang mga activities itong Chinese national. And nung nahuli nga siya dito sa Makati with a RAV4 vehicle, meron siyang mga improvised na technological equipment sa loob ng sasakyan. And with that, of course, we have to conduct forensics dun sa laman ng improvised na tech, no? And we look at this as one whole system. So when we say system, there's components of hardware to it, yung software na ginamit doon, no? Yung the data that passes inside, no? And what is processed, yun yung pinaka-importante. Kung ano yung laman nun, ano yung purpose nun, and saan patungo yun for what it's worth, no? Kung saan siya gagamitin. So lahat yan iniimbestigahan, hinihimay-himay siya in detail, all of these components, and as we look at that, we also try to see how it is part of a bigger issue at hand. So we're trying to take a step back, look at the bigger picture and connect the dots together. So it's like a puzzle piece that we're trying to fit in all of the different scenarios at hand. So titingnan natin to how it connects to our geopolitical tensions that we're facing, no? Pati itong mga drones that were recovered in our seas, lahat yan, no? Over and above that, marami pang iba't ibang mga pangyayari that would fit into the picture.
So you're saying this is just the tip of the iceberg? There's a whole network of operations we're potentially looking at here.
Could be, yes. Pati nga yung illegal pogo activities.
National Security Council, Yusek Malaya.
Kasi there were statements made by the Embassy of China, no, that supposedly the accusations are baseless, no, and that we should stop hyping the issue. No? On the part of the National Security Council, I think what we would like to say is that we have a solid case. We have the solid case against the Chinese agent or spy that we arrested. Of course, we cannot preempt the release of the information to the public. The evidences that we have collected over time. Kasi I'd like to emphasize the Richard, no, na hindi naman ito parang one-day operation. There was extensive case build-up and surveillance was done on this individual. No? So nakita natin yung galaw niya, nakita natin na pinuntahan niya yung mga lugar na kahina-hinala and places of significant military importance to us, significant strategic locations with pinuntahan niya, nag-surveillance siya doon. And let me emphasize also that they were caught red-handed, which in legal parlance is in flagrante delicto. So hawak-hawak niya yung mga surveillance equipment, no? Kaya nahalala yung mga galaw niya. And then, so, ang masasabi lang namin in reaction, of course, to what the Chinese embassy and the Chinese government said in Beijing, is that this individual will have his day in court. Kaya nga natin pinal yung kaso. Diba? We filed the necessary cases for violation of the Espionage Act and the cybercrime law, and he will have his opportunity. But so far as the government is concerned, we have a very solid case. And we have all the necessary evidences to prove his culpability.
Yusek Malaya, and of course, newly minted Dr. Malaya. Going back to this, a few months ago, there were a couple of reports about a certain person posing as a journalist who was apparently working with the MSS, Ministry of Security Services of China. So it looks like, you know, the AFP and our security agencies have been looking into this espionage networks for quite some time. Was that the tip of the iceberg? Are we also looking at, again, of course, happy Chinese New Year, of course, you know, we don't want to go into this paranoid, xenophobic kind of mode, but the reality is that we also have cases whereby people posing as journalists, legitimate journalists, but actually they're engaged in high-grade intelligence gathering operations. How is the government approaching this issue and making sure at the same time we don't get into an overcorrection mode?
You know, Richard, we have suspected that for a long time, that they had extensive operations here in the Philippines. I don't want to preempt the announcement of the NBI and of course other relevant law enforcement agencies, but there will be more arrests.
Itong
There will
fintech
be more
na
arrests.
nakapokus ito ang
We'll
kanilang program
probably
po.
have announcements in the next few days about other individuals which we also caught conducting intelligence operations in the Philippines. So, ang ano lang namin sa ating mga kababayan, we would like to thank all of them for their support to the government. Kasi nagsisimula ito sa report ng ating mga kababayan. No? So, again, our appeal to the public, if you see any suspicious activity, please report that immediately to the nearest law enforcement agency, the Philippine National Police, even the armed forces. They have their intelligence service, which can help us, and of course the National Bureau of Investigation. Yes, Richard, that is just the tip of the iceberg, and there will be more arrests in the coming days because we have seen the extensive operations that they have been doing in the Philippines, and slowly we are able to disrupt and to stop all of these activities in our country.
Can I ask both of you, and then I want to go to Justice Carville and also Commander Tarelli on the bigger issue of dealing with treasonous activities, espionage activities in peacetime, because there's a legal aspect to that. But but before that, where is the pogo angle here? Because the concern was that, you know, you had a massive influx of nationals from certain country. It looks like the verification mechanisms were not optimal. There were already concerns about PLA or Chinese intelligence agents embedding themselves in some of these supposedly legitimate business activities or online casino activities. Anong kinalaman ng dalawa na yan? The reason I'm asking that is because, I don't know, maybe this is just correlation, not necessarily causation. But sabi ng marami, kumonti daw yung mga spam sa text nung paalis na yung mga pogo, right? So at least maybe, there's one thing we know, at least baka may kinalaman mga yan. But the more serious concern could be perhaps, where's the pogo angle on this?
If you look at it, there's a different side of the pogo dito, no? Yung illegal side nila. Ang nakita natin dyan, with all of the investigations that have been made, may mga human trafficking tayo that was involved. Meron tayong mga cyber incidents, no? Na mga spamming incidents, scamming. And ito was evidence, no? By sa mga raid that were conducted, and nakakita din tayo ng mga equipment na nandoon. What I'd like to point out here is para sa ating mga kababayan na wag i-downplay ito. Kasi some are saying na hindi naman high-tech itong equipment na to. But what matters is the data that is being taken and how it's gonna be used. Pag titignan mo yung data that's inside, no, the NBI will give a list. These are hundreds of topographic images of critical infrastructures. So our power grids, our camps, our PNP and EFP camps. So bakit itong mga to ang talagang nandoon, no? Mga pantalan natin, mga frequented by Filipinos, malls, diba? So, mall-goers sa mga Pilipino So, syempre, for us in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we look at national security in general and all of this that has an implication to national security, such as critical infrastructures, talagang titignan natin yan. So, we really do not downplay all of these things and we really value nga po itong mga reports that are coming from our kababayans. Kasi, pati po yung mga na-recover nating drones from the seas came from our fishermen. Sila yung nag-report nito. No? So, ngayon, may mga nakikita tayo like in social media. In the news kagabi, sir, meron din nag-report about yung kahina-hinala nga na Chinese national taking videos of PCG assets, no, and Navy assets. So, itong mga to, we're looking at all of these things and trying to see how all of these incidents fit into a grand plan.
And if speaking of grand plan, I mean, one of the defense you always hear from folks in the civil society, especially from the Chinoy community, is this idea that, we were talking a person who asawa niya Pilipino, 10 years na siya dito. So, are we saying that it's possible that the MSS or China is targeting also Philippine-based or even Philippine citizens for that matter? Because some people are trying to use that to say, hindi yan magsaspy kasi Pinoy naman yan just because may Chinese blood or something. Is there a particular demographic that is being targeted? Is it a diverse demographic? Just for people to have an idea.
Yes, sir, no. Ang una natin dito we'd like to point out is we do not want to promote xenophobia and racism. So we're not targeting a particular race or ethnicity or kung ano man. But ang tinitingnan natin dito is evidence-based. So we always work on empirical data on kung ano yung nagagather natin, no, na kahina-hinala nga. So it doesn't necessarily hone in, but ang nagkakataon talaga is nag-hone in siya to particular nationality. So, but again, it's always evidence-based. And yun nga, ang sabi ni Sir, they will have their day in court and doon naman they will have the opportunity to really
cut natin po ang patalastas, no?
I'll go back to the critical infrastructure, but I also want to get the view of other panels. Justice Scorpio, going back to this, what is your read that our perhaps legal software has not been updated enough to deal with the liquid warfare, this kind of new emerging security challenges we're facing in the Philippines? Do we need to update our laws to deal with peacetime, treason, espionage activities, etc.?
Yes, I think
Not
we
Bato
need to
de la
update
Rosa.
our criminal laws.
Ayan,
For
sabi
example,
niya wala daw napansin
under
na
existing law, under the revised
kahit
penal
anong ang
code,
problema po
treason
na
can be committed
sa
only during
helicopter.
wartime. So,
Okay, si Senator
Filipino
Rodan
who
Bato de
does
la
this,
Rosa.
help the Chinese gather
Okay, habang,
information vital for
nakasakay
our
siya
national
dito,
security, cannot be
papuntang Baguio mga susunod.
prosecuted
So,
for
dapat itong
treason
si
So we have to change our laws because iba na ngayon, no? This is we are now in the cyber age, and the Chinese don't have to send their people here. They can just send robots, drones to gather information, or use Filipinos here. So we have to update really a lot of our criminal laws, especially on national security.
Thank you for that. I'll get back to that theme again more. Comrade Tariela, you have been at the forefront of dealing with trolls. It's like, I think we can change notes on the analytics, right? But this is information warfare, right? And it's a serious warfare because it's a battle of narratives for the hearts and minds of people. Is there an evolution or change you see in the narrative strategy? How serious is this information warfare? Do you expect it to get even worse in the coming months? And so, but before that, can you also give us an update doon sa nangyari on the ground right now, itong monster ship ng China na mini-monitor nyo? So, a little bit of update on the ground and then going back to this more information warfare and espionage team.
Thank you, Richard. The China Coast Guard monster ship that we monitored last January 4 at a distance of 54 nautical miles away from Capones Island, Zambales. Ginawa ng Philippine Coast Guard dito sa pag-utos ng ating Commandant, Admiral Ron Hilgaban, is to deploy Teresa Magbanwa. That is the biggest Coast Guard vessel that we have. And then from January 4 until now, we have rotated our vessels from Magbanwa to Gabriela Silang, Suluan, Cabra, and then again, it's BRP Teresa Magbanwa who is again taking the responsibility of monitoring and challenging the China Coast Guard monster ship. For the past days, we have been very successful in pushing back the China Coast Guard vessels. Right now, as we speak, the latest position of the Chinese Coast Guard 3304 that replaced also the Chinese monster ship is at 88 nautical miles away from Zambales. So, as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we are committed in protecting the interests of the Filipino fishermen, in safeguarding our maritime jurisdiction, and at the same time, laging sinasabi ng ating Pangulong Bongbong Marcos, we should come up with actions that will not escalate the tension. Regarding your questions sa mga trolls and disinformation, Richard, I think when we started the transparency efforts, we noticed that there is a sudden surge of trolls. Mas dumami ang active trolls nila ngayon in different social media platforms. Mas naging loud ang trolls ngayon pagdating sa pagpapakalat ng maling impormasyon sa West Philippine Sea. I think this is the reaction with the transparency efforts that the National Task Force West Philippine Sea is doing right now. And at the same time, we are coming up with different approaches to dominate the public discourse about our own factual narrative.
Thank you for that, Commodore. Obviously, nowadays a lot of conversation about China's technological breakthrough, DeepSeek among others, and one of the things that caught people's attention is how DeepSeek seems to be very wise and intelligent on all sorts of questions, except when you ask them about Tiananmen or West Philippine Sea or sensitive, because agents said, "Oh, I'm just an AI assistant." I don't know anything like that. Which brings it back to the issue of cybersecurity. Colonel Padilla, you are the expert in cybersecurity issue. What are the things that we have been doing, again, without spilling the beans for friends, in terms of protecting our basic critical infrastructure from cyber attacks and cyber sabotage? How important is our cooperation with our allies, trilateral, US and Japan, but also other new allies that are coming on board? And I want to also connect that to other critical infrastructure. For instance, the big news the other day was the Maharlika Fund is trying to buy into the NGCP to make sure there's more direct government stake. But then again, you talk to technical people, they'll say it's not the financial part which is the issue, it's the engineers who run the show. It may be 40% China, but 100% China when it comes to the technical engineering part, right? How important it is for us to, the risk to clean up, right, some of the vulnerabilities we have built on throughout different administrations. Because to be fair about it, it's not one or two administration in our critical infrastructure, cybersecurity and also other forms of critical infrastructure.
Yes, Richard. In our command conference itong January, our Commander-in-Chief or President has given the AFP guidance on strengthening cybersecurity, not just within the AFP, but in coordination with different agencies as well. So kung titingnan natin dito, we're looking at this not just on the security aspect, but cyber operations in general. So how do we use all of these gadgets? Paano magiging mapanuri yung ating mga kababayan in all this, no? So, ang kasama natin dyan, task natin is to teach them about cyber hygiene. Kasi security is everyone's responsibility. So kung ang great online presence natin, gamitin natin to our advantage, makakatulong ang bawat kababayan natin. So we can use social media to give reports, to make all of this videos showing itong mga kahina-hinalan, then they can be part of evidences and all those things. No? So, ang cyber operations is not just it's a system nga, no? How we use this hardware, ano yung policy natin to use certain softwares. So, kung tingnan nyo yung US, they already banned TikTok, diba? Which is Chinese-owned.
Until Trump saved them for 90 days, but let's see where
Yes, so may mga ganun. So, ang tinitingnan natin dyan, how the Philippines will also look at all of this as an angle of us trying also to have certain policies that will govern our presence in the cyber domain. Kasi nga, ang laki ng presence ng Pilipino sa cyber domain. No? So, lahat yan tinitingnan natin. And of course, the advent of artificial intelligence. With AI now, you don't even need to have a troll farm with all of these people in front of computers. You can just use an AI and yun na siya, no? Lalabas na yun, no? And the possibilities in artificial intelligence is endless. We can use it for different needs. So, ang tinitingnan natin dito, if AI is being used to attack us, to be antagonists on our part, then we also have to look into AI for our defense.
We're number one when it comes to
on TikTok. I have a lot to say on TikTok, but maybe I'll talk to their legal team first. Man. You know, I mean, especially elections also coming in, right? I mean, one of the reasons raised in the U.S. for banning TikTok, although there's a Trump element there, is that it's not only what's happening now, but what could happen in an event of conflict, right? So one of the scenarios, let's say there's a war over Taiwan, and then, you know, vast majority of Americans are, you know, into TikTok, then there could be a manipulation of information to undermine a kind of a, you know, rallying around the flag, or a kind of at least basic understanding of the facts of the case. When you have a whole of nation approach, supposedly, when you're dealing with conflict. What is the level of discussion right now in the Philippine National Security Council when it comes to these issues? Because the DeepSeek now is, everyone is downloading it so much so that now I think it's only restricted to people of Chinese numbers or something like that. It's a damning the download because it's just so easy to use. It's so efficient.
Growing your dream business and selling products that are loved doesn't have to be a struggle with the right tool like Odoo. Integration of your end-to-end business process makes boring labor as easy as... And managing tasks among your team becomes as simple as drag and drop. Let the right tool compile the right data for you to make smart growth strategies with confidence so that you can focus on what really matters to grow your dream business. Unleash your growth potential and let Odoo do the rest.
Efficient. And then of course TikTok, which is doing very well. How worried should we be about these things without being, again, paranoid and overcorrective and also unfair to these folks? I mean, shout out to TikTok Philippines. You know, they helped me to restore my account, which weirdly went, you know, banned and then returned, right? Like, weird things happen.
Yes. Siguro, Richard, before I answer that, balikan ko lang yung sa amendments to the espionage act. Yeah, kasi it is as part of our discussion on espionage. Kasi what we have is Commonwealth Act 616, which is a very old law. 1941 pa po itong batas na ito, no?
Okay,
And as you mentioned very clearly, yung ating mga batas on espionage are pretty much outdated, and it needs to be updated. And there are several bills now pending in Congress. Unfortunately, given the lack of time, material time that we have, probably this won't pass this Congress. But this will be, again, part of the priorities of the National Security Council once Congress resumes its session sa June. No? So if this Congress, our focus was on the passage of the Maritime Zones Law and Archipelagic Sea Lanes, next year, ang ipupush namin is the amendments to the Espionage Act and the
district din.
Foreign Malign Influence
Basilan
Act.
din,
No?
no?
Two very important
Loan
pieces of
district
legislation.
ng
As you
Sarangani
mentioned, as
province,
part of lawfare,
Okay,
in our
yan po
desire
ang superstar
to
na
insulate
bigyan sa
or
Sarangani
inoculate the
province.
Philippines from this. No?
Huwag
So,
natin
just some
kalimutan
important
po ay
things that we need to
mga kaibigan natin yan, matagal po yan sa inyo.
update in our laws is
Okay,
to emphasize that espionage may be committed in times of peace and
Okay.
war. No? Very,
Number
that
one
should be very
superstar
made
po
clear in
ng,
our laws. No?
probinsya
And
ng Sarangani province.
itong the violation no,
Congressman, dating governor.
can be imposed on
Okay,
a foreign
dating
nation or
term.
enemy of the state,
And
whether
then,
this be
pang-ilang term
domestic
naman,
or
pangatlo
foreign.
naman
That's
ito,
to be very made
pangalawa.
clear also.
Pangatlo ata.
These are the things that gusto nating ma-amend.
Okay.
No? The
Isang
use of
superstar
drones, for
po sa
example,
politiko.
kasi dun sa lumang batas,
Bigyan po sa Sarangani
photographic evidence lang. No?
Congressman
So,
Steve Song.
dun sa lumang batas, if you take photos of a military installation,
Balikan natin
that is
ang news.
espionage. But if you use a drone or if you use a similar machine or device, hindi siya explicitly provided in the law. So we would like to include that as well. And then yung fines, no?
Okay, marami ang tatanong sa akin,
has
bakit
to
ako
be
yung lumang plugin
increased.
diyan sa aking
Dati
bayan sa
10,000 lang.
Paano kung
Right?
mag-plugin?
So we want this increased to
Parehas naman ang
1,500,000. Even the penalties we have to
Hindi na
increase.
lang.
So lahat ng ito, no,
Okay, neutral na
these
lang muna sa
amendments are
Neutral na lang.
clearly very needed
Sa kaso po ng police.
given the fact that we are slowly uncovering
Ayan po.
a massive,
Hindi
a
na,
lot of
hindi na.
Intelligence
Hindi na
operations
tayo
being done by
mag-isaw-saw dyan. Marami
foreign
naman tayong
states
suki sa iba.
or foreign powers in the Philippines.
Hindi na po,
And
hindi
by
na
doing
mag-isaw-saw
so,
dyan sa probinsya.
we will be able to complete our defense system against them because we really need good legal foundations to be able to proceed forward.
Thank you for that. Justice Scorpio, I mean, obviously, we're not the first country that noticed we need to update our laws. A lot of our democratic friends, I used to be based in Taiwan and Australia a lot. They have been having this conversation for a long time, and they have been updating and upgrading their legal infrastructure for quite some time. And these are liberal democracies, vibrant democracies. What are the best practices, perhaps, that could serve? Of course, it has to be a Filipino-specific, legal update, but nevertheless, we do have best practices that we can draw on, right? To make sure. Kasi, for sure, sasabihin naman ng mga, yung mga nag-aspire. kasi kung 10,000 lang, okay na yan. Kung kikitain ko 1 million, 10,000 lang. So, they're gonna say, oh, this is authoritarianism, and so how do we make sure it doesn't get weaponized, in short? And do we have evidence that it's not getting weaponized in other fellow democracies?
Well, the US and the Europeans are a good example because they have updated their laws on espionage, but they have maintained, they have protected freedom of expression. No? So Australia has also recently updated their laws, and it's about time that we also update our laws. But the protection will always be there. It's in the Constitution, so that cannot be changed. But we just have to have a change of mindset. Remember, during the time of President Duterte, he even allowed Tito, which is obviously supplied by Chinatel. All the equipment comes from China, to put up these towers within all military camps nationwide, and that was allowed. Fortunately, the military did not implement that, so that has been scrapped, as the way I understand it. But we have to be very conscious of these developments now, because even our phones are being tapped all the time. I mean, it's very easy to follow. You don't know it, but you're already, all your emails are already being tapped. No? So we have to be very conscious. For me, I just assume that I'm being tapped by China. I mean, and so you just have to be careful. But we have to update our laws also. Thank you.
That's why ganun yung mga sagot niyo sa akin in the middle of the night, just in case may gising pa sa kabila. Kung tayo lang, kailangan pa ng kasuhan din ng live volume. Kasi, maybe Justice can also put something in this minsan. Of course, as a public official, the threshold is different, but Minsan medyo iba na no? Kaya parang ayoko mag-government. Parang ngayon pa lang ganyan na what if government ka na, di ba?
Alam mo, Richard, the other day yata, the Congress already mentioned the possibility of looking into itong mga trolls na nagpapakalat ng misinformation. They also mentioned the West Philippine Sea encountering our transparency efforts. So I think the Congress and Senate, I think last year, Senator Jinggoy also filed a statement na the Senate should look into those trolls that counter our narrative in the West Philippine Sea. As far as the legislative branch is concerned, I think it's not just us who notice this, that they need to look into the limiting the freedom of expression. No? Alam naman natin how the disinformation and fake news affect our position in the West Philippine Sea.
Okay,
And sometimes may mga Pilipino na bubola itong mga China trolls na to. And that makes our position very hard to push to the Filipino people for them to understand our position in the West Philippines.
And obviously, it's not just trolls, right? There's some people who have suddenly think tanks popping out of nowhere. They're suddenly experts on South China Sea. I never heard of zero Google Scholar citation, but apparently they're experts on UNCLOS. I mean, they're going toe-to-toe with Justice Scorpio and Jake Batumbakal. Should we nudge our friends to be a bit more transparent about where their loyalties lie? Like,
alam mo, hindi lang to mga claiming to be an academic. Itong mga ibang pro-China trolls na to, hindi na nga trolls, these are real people, ay dating gobyerno, taga-gobyerno before. They used to be public officials, may maayos na reputasyon noon, hindi na lang ngayon, dahil pro-China na sila.
Kung may blank item, ikaw blind item sa Congress. Okay. Justice Garvey, you want to say something on that? Because, legally, wala naman problema, diba? You can just enroll as a, you're an agent of foreign influence. I mean, there should be mechanisms like that, right? Para wala tayong problema. Kasi wala naman akong problema in terms of academic discussion. As an academic, I love it. But when your argument is always pro-China and then you happen to be based here and parang copy-paste ng press statement ng ibang embassy, that raises some questions, right? So we're not against academic debates. I argue against Philippine cases in some of the writings I have, but iba yun sa parang nangyari sa iba. Should we nudge our friends? Should we have mechanisms for registration as foreign influence agent?
Well, in the US, you have the Foreign Agent Registration Act. You have to register if you are acting as an agent of a foreign government, if you're receiving any kind of compensation from foreign government. I think we have actually a law, but it's not being implemented. We have to really update that also and require all Filipinos who receive compensation from foreign governments to say particular things for that foreign government should register as a foreign agent. That can be required. That will be constitutional.
When you say compensation, let's say you're taken to some 5-star hotel somewhere nice in, let's say Shanghai or something. Does that pass as compensation, or should be like a certain amount of money, wire transfer, etc.?
Well, it should be a certain amount, but it can also be benefits.
Benefits, like fellowship, like visiting scholar.
In the U.S. Constitution, they call that emoluments, but it's broadly interpreted. That would be an emolument also if you receive a first-class ticket, your first-class hotel accommodation. So we should update our law on this because I think the existing law that was passed during the martial law regime on registration of foreign agents, I don't think anyone registered ever. So we just have to update it.
Digital banking. Online banking ba? Okay, hindi na kailangan pupunta pa sa bangko. Dito lang mag-broadcast ako, maka-save na po ng ating kung meron income po itong news natin, no? Dito lang po sa studio, hindi na pupunta sa bangko kay noon na po kay high-tech na yun mga
Right, yeah. No, I mean, the reason I say, like, for instance, in Australia, with the case of Sam Dastyari, the senator, right? Parang, there was a small gift, like a few $100 something like that. But that became a basis essentially for huge investigation into espionage activities in Australia and all. I think in New York, as we speak, the current mayor is under question for getting all that free business class trip from Turkish Airlines. So it doesn't have to be now $4 million. It doesn't have to be millions of dollars, right? It could be like free business class trips. That could pass as some form of compensation, right? I'm just trying to clarify to people that na hindi kailangan milyones ang bayad sa'yo para maging ano ka, diba?
Yeah, we have really to tighten because we see now that China is exerting so much influence now in on the Philippines. No? So we just have to tighten all of these rules.
Colonel Padilla, you said Malay, you want to say something also on this issue in terms of tightening up itong Foreign Agent Act and also making sure that we have also transparency initiative on that front.
Yes, I would like to re-echo nga itong sinabi ni Secretary Anyo. So we have in the Armed Forces of the Philippines, we also have to have a foundation and a basis for our actions. We're looking at this as a united front works ng China. And so we're looking at all of these activities. Pag titignan kasi natin to, there's different powers of the state. And there's two domains na pantay-pantay tayo, walang mahirap at mayamang bansa, walang which is the information and the cyber domain. So kaya nating sumabay dito eh. So yung information as we speak, Maritime Transparency Initiative na talaga namang sinusulong ng ating grupo, no? But ito yung target ng kanilang United Front Works na basagin itong yung pagiging solid nitong ating Transparency Initiative. So we're looking at all of this and also yung cyber implication nito, no? Ang batas kasi ng Pilipinas is only on cybercrime. So very negative yung niya. But the cyber operations as a whole, what equipment will be using, what software can we be using, how to use them, where to deploy them, diba? Yung mga bring your own devices in certain networks, wala tayong batas tungkol dyan. So itong mga to, kailangan din natin itong palawigin sa ating bansa. Para pati yung mga certain agencies, ano lang yung pwede nilang gamitin, ano lang yung mga devices na pwedeng kumonekta sa certain networks, user-raised assignments, kasama lahat yan. No? Napakalawak ng pwede pang mangyari, not just cybercrime. Kasi yun ang batas natin, only the criminal aspect to it, the use of
And are you having interaction? Because I'm sure last year everyone was busy with Quadcom and Huaping and all. But what is the level of interaction with the legislative branch to make sure they're keeping abreast and doing their job on this front?
Sa side ko ng AFP, we are one part of the big picture, no? So this is more of like a national task force or whole of nation, whole of government approach, and we are one part of the players in this, and we're doing our fair share to coordinate with the different agencies accordingly. So maganda naman po yung aming tandem, especially with the umbrella of NSC, no? Kasi sa kanilang policy level, so operational level, kami na po yung mag-i-implement.
Ang kita-kita mo kahit makikita no? Kailangan natin meron kang privacy
well, as mentioned by Justice Scorpio, we have this very old law which was passed during World War II yata, no? During just before World War II, as a reaction also to the passage in the US of their own Foreign Agent Registration Act. And medyo nakalimutan na natin ito, no? It could have been implemented before but not anymore. But in the US, it's a very strong law. Very strict. The FBI will just go to your office and ask you if you're lobbying, if you're a lobbyist or a firm lobbying for a foreign entity and hindi ka rehistrado, that could lead to severe penalties and imprisonment. So we also need that. So it's really a tandem of laws, the amendments to the espionage, an updated foreign agent registration, and the foreign malign influence and interference law, which a version has been just submitted to the Senate by Senator Tolentino yesterday. Okay, so again, we hope that all of these pieces of legislation will be prioritized by the Senate and Congress once the new Congress assumes office in June.
The other aspect I want to talk about is also we saw this emergence of LGU to LGU cooperation. So there when it comes to Belt and Road Initiative, big ticket infrastructure projects, halos parang walang nangyari. You know, I call it pledge trap, right? Maraming pangako, walang masyadong nangyari. But from what I understand is maraming mga LGUs, we don't have to blind items tayo ulit, na marami silang mga sister city projects with China, and this could have implications for critical infrastructure. It's not just building schools or road widening. It could be something more, and some of these LGUs are in very sensitive locations, whether in the bigger geopolitical sense or close to military facilities. How are we looking at that aspect, the LGU level? Because puro tayong national eh.
Yeah, we saw that already, what is called as foreign interference on the sub-national level. Yeah, so early last year, the DILG issued a order on the moratorium of sisterhood cities. Kasi ang ginawa natin, nag-inventaryo tayo, iba't ibang mga sisterhood or twinning arrangements with between Philippine cities or local government units and those in China, in the People's Republic of China. And there was a review process that was undertaken. No? So there's a moratorium right now, and if there is a new sister cityhood or sister city arrangement, it will have to be submitted to the DILG. The DILG issued a memorandum circular to this effect, and a review panel or committee was created. Kasama po kami doon sa National Security Council. So we're currently doing the reviews right now, and those that we feel are inimical to the national interest, we tell the local government unit to rescind or to repeal those provisions. Pero alam nyo kasi, it's also tricky itong mga sisterhood arrangements na ito, but because on the surface, sa tingin mo, benign, no? Pag wala namang mali, no? But it's really make them more aware of the pitfalls of entering into sisterhood.
Are you seeing a lot of these sisterhood arrangements in, again, we don't have to name names, but in particular sensitive provinces, maybe facing West Philippine Sea, Taiwan?
Yes, we saw that, no? So we saw the the LGUs had sisterhood arrangements were in strategic places, either facing the West Philippine Sea or adjacent to a EDCA site, or in an area where mining operations are present, and these the minerals in these mining operations are important critical minerals for many nations. Yeah.
Hindi ko naman sinasabi. I almost named her. Yes, Justice.
Richard, I also like to bring up the Chinese Confucius Institutes that many of our schools have entered into arrangements with Chinese universities for Chinese universities to establish, let's say in Ateneo and UP and other schools, China institutes. And it's a one-way ticket because China establishes...
Walang reciprocity.
Yeah, there is no reciprocity. We have allowed the China Institute in UP, in Ateneo, but Ateneo and UP do not have Rizal institutes in their counterpart universities in China. So we should demand reciprocity, because right now they can distribute any kind of material, information they want in UP or Ateneo or in other schools, but we cannot explain our position on the West Philippine Sea to the Chinese people. So it's a one-way street, so we should demand at least reciprocity.
I want to go back to the issue of actually RORES and all of that, and also with Colonel Padilla and National Security Council. So you gave us an update, Commodore Teriela, on the monster ship situation and all. What is the RORES situation in terms of resupply of our our facilities and our people dyan sa West Philippine Sea?
Richard, when we discuss RORE, that's actually an AMP operation. But as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we have been supportive of the supply mission going to Ayungin. The last
Okay,
mission
ang
was
sunod
very
na
successful.
balita
The
natin
Philippine
sa
Coast Guard
umaga
vessel
ito
was also there
tungkol
to
po sa
support the resupply
quality and
operation.
testing, no?
As to the details of which I
Yung
think the Armed Forces of the Philippines is
hiling po
in a
ng
better
taong
position
bayan
to discuss the
na
entire
matest
operation.
po ang Pangulo po sa
Thank you. I mean, obviously next time we'll try to have also DFA and others. But from an AFP standpoint, Colonel, because the last major incident and was around June last year, right? And when there was an injury to one of our servicemen at least. But since then, there has been no major incident. So there are a lot of theories. One theory is my understanding, my arrangement, whatever. Again, what are the facts of the case to the degree that you can share? And what do you attribute the fact that there's no longer a major incident? Is it because China's accepted that we're not going to accept bullying, that we're going to stand our ground? Does this have to do also with America and our allies also standing with us? To the degree that you can share with us, ano yung dahilan na hindi nangyari yung mga kababalagan na nangyari last year? Kumbaga.
Sa tingin ko, third policy level yun, no? Yung higher level ng AFP. On the side of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, itong ating mga RORA missions, rotation and resupply, is the mandate of the AFP. So as long as we have AFP personnel and all of these features that we hold, we will continue to perform our mandate to look at the welfare, no, ng ating mga deployed dun sa area. So this is a regular thing for the Armed Forces of the Philippines. So hindi lang kasi to iisang feature lang. All of the 9 features at any one time, regularly natin kinoconduct that. In fact, all the other 8 features, we use gray ships for that. No? So, continuous yan natin na ginagawa. Kung ano ang usapin na nakapaloob doon, that would be on a higher level authority to discuss. But in terms of the AFP, we will not be deterred to continue providing for these RORA missions to our troops in the ground.
Sa tingin ba natin, nahanap ba natin yung right formula to make sure that China gets the message na hindi tayo magpa-intimidate? Or do you think that this is an evolving threat and accordingly we have to keep on upping our game and working more with our allies and all? I know medyo speculative question yan, but my point is that syempre evolving yung situation on the ground. China is not the China of 2 years ago, and I'm sure they're also responding accordingly. May pangtapat din sila sa Transparency Initiative, right? Or they try to, right? So I'm sure they're constantly adjusting to us, no? Meron bang new versions of salami slicing? Are we worried about setting dangerous precedents if we have certain arrangements here and there, right?
I think ang napopoint out at napapakita natin dyan as a whole, no, with our great magandang samahan with other agencies. So we are in very close coordination with the Coast Guard in all of these other missions as well. And we actually salute the Coast Guard for yung kanilang pag-deter, no, sa paglapit nga nitong mga vessels ng China dito sa ating features. But ang maganda natin point out dito is the great resolve of the Filipinos to continue on with this independently. So, titignan natin dyan, even if we have offers to conduct RORA missions altogether, no, we do it independently. Kaya natin with our own resolves, with our own assets. As we continue to modernize and as we also continue to strengthen alliances with like-minded nations, tinitignan din natin kung ano yung maitutulong nila. And not just for this, not just for these missions on sea, but nag-ano rin to nagre-resonate din siya pati sa ating HADR mission. So, itong alliances natin, mas malawak yung sakop din niya over that just doing this RORA missions.
Thank you for segueing into the next important part because we want to talk about how the new Trump administration, what are the implications for our bilateral alliance. But Yusik Malay, you want to add also on the RORA issue from the National Security Council point of view in terms of coordination, making sure everyone is working together, lessons learned, learning lessons, moving forward.
Well, Richard, alam mo naman that we have the preliminary... we can now resupply our troops in DRP Sharmat in a peaceful fashion. And we have been doing so, in a regular way since
mga
the
suki,
signing
mga
of the
kabayan,
preliminary
pakinggan naman natin
understanding.
ang
And
first
in the last
bisita po ng
BCM, both sides are committed to
47
continue the
President ng
implementation of
United
the
States of
preliminary
America.
understanding. So,
Okay,
on the
si
side of the
Benjamin
Philippines, this
Netanyahu
really
po
is
ng
a
Israel, mga
good
suki,
step
no?
because And also on the side of China, because that means that they are also open to some sort of arrangement. Because at the end of the day, what's critical is BRP Sierra Madre is still there. No, there's no way that it's going anywhere, and that we are committed to resupply our troops because they are a symbol of our sovereignty in that area.
Commodore and then also Justice, yeah. Please.
Yes, I would like to just highlight that the provisional understanding that we have with China is only targeted in Ayungin resupply. It doesn't apply to the entire West Philippine Sea. There is no provisional understanding whatsoever that covers the entire West Philippine Sea. It's only concentrated in Ayungin. Because
But aren't you fearing that China will push for that? That yung precedence issue that, then maybe next we have to do on Sabina Shoal, next. Yeah.
I don't think that we need to agree on something if we believe that West Philippine Sea belongs to the Filipino people, right? I mean, we can have that provisional understanding in Ayungin because of what had happened in June 17. But we should not come up with the idea that another understanding will also be applied in different pockets of the West Philippine Sea. Because as far as the Philippine government is concerned, we have sovereignty and sovereign rights in this area. So I don't think that it is a win for the Philippine government if we're going to come up with another agreement because we just want to de-escalate the tension. In the first place, the escalation, the provocative actions that are happening in the West Philippine Sea is only done by the Chinese side. As far as the government is concerned, we have been very peaceful. We are not provocative. We are always on the receiving end of their provocation.
But the American government
Are there?
has been
I'll go to Justice very shortly. But I want to just ask Commodore Teriela, what are the lessons we have learned from the Transparency Initiative? Magsi-second year anniversary na ba? Parang magsi-second year na, di ba?
Yes, the first news that we released in 2023 was actually the military grade laser. That's the first news that we started the Transparency Initiative. Yeah, so second year this coming February 12.
So we're just a week away or so. Yeah.
But again, the question ng mga tao is, how is the transparency affecting the Filipino people? There are some critics saying that the transparency is not really that effective to counter China. Again, babalik tayo, bakit ba tayo may transparency initiative? As I said, it's not a silver bullet to tell China to adhere to the international law. Our main objective for the transparency efforts is to create awareness among the Filipino people. And based on the last survey conducted, more than 84% of Filipinos says that they are supportive of the Philippine government's efforts in the West Philippine Sea. 91% of the Filipinos are also aware now of what's happening in the West Philippine Sea. This can also be further translated with making sure that the Filipino voters will no longer vote for pro-China candidates, right? So as far as the objective of the Transparency Initiative, since we launched it 2 years ago, we have been very successful in doing that.
In setting the baseline, of what is acceptable, what is our national position, what is international law, what is our. Yun lang, my concern is there's still a 3 or 4%. like for me, why is it not 100%? Because in China, I'm sure it's 100%, right?
Well, again, going back to the issue of misinformation, the trolls, they're still doing this through their united front.
Justice, parang every week tayo nagpo-podcast on this issue. Pero have you noticed over the past 4 or 5 months, wala tayong masyadong bad news on West Philippine Sea relatively, right? And I think to be honest, I think a lot of us, maybe this is my case, we're a little bit worried that things would get out of control, right? Patapos ng Biden administration, distracted, war in Gaza, Ukraine, oh my God. But it looks like hindi nangyari yung mga worst case scenarios. Having said that, Justice Carpio, is there a danger of complacency, or actually we have to give credit to ourselves that perhaps we did something right to get China's grudging respect, and we can build on that into the coming months. And then obviously I want to also get your point of view on what should be the next step. Should we also move on an arbitration front? What are the other potentially drastic moves that has to be done?
On the road, on Ayungin Shoal, we have to understand that Ayungin Shoal is part of our EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone. It's low tide elevation, so it's part of our EEZ. In the EEZ, there's freedom of navigation for all countries. So the U.S. can go to Ayungin Shoal anytime they want without seeking permission from China or from any other country, not even from the Philippines. South Korea can do that, Japan can do that, Australia can do that. So, with more reason, the Philippines should be able to go to a UNITROL at any time without asking permission from China or from any other country. So, I'm worried that this particular preliminary agreement will be taken by China to mean that they have some sort of control
Okay,
over our RORE.
Secretly Donald
They do
Trump
not
po na
have.
kumbinsin niya yung
We do not need their consent. We do not need to inform them whenever we go to Ayungin Shoal because it's our EEZ, and in the EEZ, all the nations of the world have freedom of navigation. They can go there anytime. That's why I agree with Commodore Tariala that we cannot expand this. This is unique and this should be temporary and we should end it as soon as we can because China will tell late. I can see what China will do now. Let us expand this preliminary agreement to the entire West Philippine Sea because we have agreed to it. No, we cannot because otherwise we will be giving up our sovereign rights. Let me be very clear. We have a right to go to Ayungin Shoal at any time to bring any supply to Sierra Madre at any time without informing China, without meeting China beforehand. Because that is our right, our sovereign right. The moment we try to limit that because China demands some limitation, we are already giving up our sovereign right. And China will use this example to expand this agreement in the West Philippine Sea. We have to, I'm anticipating China to do that already.
Well, to be fair to Secretary Manalo during my interview with him last year, he made it clear that we're not asking anyone's permission or anything like that. So it looks like some people weaponize the word arrangement or understanding as if it's like, oy pare, pupunta kami dyan, ha? Pwede, huwag niyo kaming tirahin. Parang ganon yung ginawa ng China na narrative.
Yeah, we say that we have a right to go there, but in practice, on the ground level, every time we go there, we first have to talk to China, and that is a matter of practice. So that will take, China will say, oh, you have to do that every time you supply Pag-asa. Every time you supply Lawak, you have to meet with us, and then we have given up our sovereign rights already. We have to be very careful because China has been doing this to Vietnam. The moment you give them a little leeway, they will demand more. So we have to be very careful that we do not give up our sovereign rights because whatever we do on the ground is the one that will prevail, even if you put it that without prejudice to Philippine sovereign rights. But if you actually do it in practice, you ask permission from them, then that will prevail.
Yes, please, yeah.
Clarify ko lang, no? You know, of course, there's a lot of speculation about the contents of the preliminary understanding because we cannot really release the contents of the preliminary understanding without the consent of China, no? The PRC. But let me just clarify that, number one, we do not ask permission every time we do the RORE. Number two, there is no inspection of any of the ships that go to the RORE. And number three, there is no so-called supervision. And I think the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard can bear me on this, no? Because we will never, as mentioned by Justice Carpio, we will never surrender our sovereign rights and our sovereignty because our position in Ayungin Shoal is very clear and that the BRP Sierra Madre is there as the flag bearer and as a symbol of our sovereignty in that part of the PRC, of the West Philippine Sea. I think what yeah, exactly. I think what is muddling the issue here, is the spin being done by the PRC, no? In the statements that they're making. But let me just make it very clear to the public, as mentioned kanina, that there is no permission, there is no inspection, and there is no supervision whatsoever.
Just to be clear about this, and maybe Colonel Padilla also can comment on this, is it because there was a gentleman's agreement in the past, whatever that was, that China's thinking they can have this mini gentleman's agreement? Is this they're trying? Because I'm trying to understand it. You're talking about precedents, right? The precedents I can think about is the gentleman's agreement under the Duterte administration with China. My sense is that if you're China and you had a gentleman's agreement with Duterte, your sense is you can always have something along those lines, a baby version of the gentleman's
Because
agreement.
what brought the preliminary understanding was the fact that the PRC realized that we will never back down.
Okay,
The PRC realized that we will continue to
Limang
resupply
dekada po, hinahawakan
our
ng
troops in
mga,
BRP Sharamate no matter what happens.
Assad
No?
regime
So they tried water cannon, they tried military grade laser, they tried
Okay, and then
every
mga,
playbook in the coercive manual that
hawak
they
ngayon,
have. And it did not
majority
work because we continued to do what we needed to do. Diba? Tuloy lang tayo ng
sa
tuloy.
Syria,
And then
mga
they found out na
So,
it's
interim
useless doing all
government
of these
muna.
coercive
Interim
actions to them
government.
because the Philippines are not being
gawa ng
deterred.
constitution
The
nila,
Philippines is not being intimidated. So
mag-election.
they were the ones that called us. Mag-usap na lang tayo. So that brought the preliminary understanding.
Maybe you don't have to answer. I'll just ask Justice Carpio. Hindi kaya kailangan din natin ng bigyan ng konsuelo mga kaibigan natin? Para lang may masabi sila.
Yan ang,
Parang may masabi na,
Yan,
shouldn't there be an accommodation of the need for face saving or consuelo as a matter of diplomacy, not operational reality? Because I think both NSC and Coast Guard and AFM made it clear, operationally, China has no say in what we do. But in terms of diplomacy, hindi kaya Justice, we have to give them some room to save their face kasi napaya sila.
Christian ang presidente po.
Well,
majority naman sa
we
Lebanon
can
po ay
give them
Christian,
some leeway, but only once. Because if you allow it again and again,
Orthodox
as you said, it
Christian
becomes a precedence.
then
And that
itong,
is what we don't want to
Pagasa,
happen. Because right
yan,
now, if you look at it,
pumantayan po
every
ng,
time we
natin,
resupply
yung mga
Sierra Madre, we have to meet with the
ang latest
Chinese.
ay,
Now, is that
yung
mandatory?
mga
The Chinese are saying that is
evacuate
mandatory.
sa
We say,
gera
no,
po
it's
ng,
not mandatory, but we comply
Hamas
with it.
at saka Israel.
By practice, we are actually following what China wants. We have to sit down with them before we resupply Sierra Madre. That's why I said we can do it once, but next time let's go there and resupply without meeting with them, just to break that precedent so that it will not become a precedent.
And Justice, do you think that the next step, obviously I think we have a slightly different interpretation of this, which is why we are having this discussion. We're not supposed to have 100% consensus. But Justice, do you think that we, at this point, considering the fact that medyo tahimik ang West Philippines, maybe it's the typhoon season, I don't know, whatever, na, is it time for us to think about the next step, including potential another arbitration case? I haven't heard from DOJ recently, but there was a news item na naman the other week na baka there's a second arbitration on the environmental front. Is it serious? Should it be serious? Should we go to that next level? Because
yan po.
kayo po yung progenitor ng idea na yan eh.
Yeah, you know, there's one thing that China
Unlimited,
fears. China dreads that we will bring China to another arbitral case. But we should, because that's exactly what they fear. And we have an opening because one, we filed our extended continental shelf claim off the coast of Palawan beyond the Spratlys, and China protested. China said, no, we own that because that's within the 10-dash line. Under the rules of the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf, everything is frozen the moment there's an opposition. So we cannot move forward. There can be no decision because the rules say the UN Commission will not act because there is an opposition. Under the rules, it's up for us now, if we want to move it forward, to file the arbitration case. So we have to file the arbitration case because that's the next logical step to resolve the issue. If we don't, then that will be an outstanding issue forever, and we don't want that because over time China is gaining ground. China is getting more, is getting stronger. It has more warships now. It has throughout military history, it has the biggest. It has the most number of shipyards to manufacture like an assembly line warships. So time is on their side. So we have really to bring the issue now to an arbitral tribunal. But we're not. That's why I'm saying we have to bring it because if we delay, China is winning.
Obviously, the thrust of the, and this is the last part of this podcast part, then we'll go to the press conference because Justice also has to leave soon. The whole point of the arbitration case is about the rules-based international order. And, well, this is my opinion. And the new President of the United States is not necessarily, a paragon of rules-based international order. Greenland, Panama, I don't know what the heck is going to happen there. But there's some people, or at least this is the narrative some people are building, that with this new American administration, yes, you may have sympathetic figures like Marco Rubio, who has written on the need to help the Philippines. He's, of course, the new Secretary of State, someone very invested in our bilateral alliance. You have people like Elbridge Colby, who will be leading the policy in the Pentagon, who visited the Philippines the other
nasunod
year,
po
and
ang
who made
suggestion
many
po ni
reassuring
King Jordan
statements. Hagseth,
Bulan,
Mike Waltz, all of them said that it's important to have an Asia-focused strategy. That's all good. But the reality is that, on one hand, you have Trump being Trump, talking about grand bargain, deal-making, saying all of these things about China, which it's not very reassuring, just to be honest about it, including his, volte-face on the TikTok ban, which some people, even in his own party, are raising eyebrows about. And then, of course, there's also the more concrete fact that some of the new appointments coming into top positions, including some of the folks who lead the Southeast Asia portfolio in the Pentagon. I want to read a quote from one of them. Ayaw ng pangalan, baka magkaaway naman. No, I mean, essentially the argument of some of them is that so one of them who's going to lead this is Mr. Byers. He wrote last year, the U.S. might begin a cooperational spiral with China by proposing to remove U.S. military forces or weapon systems from the Philippines in exchange for the Chinese Coast Guard executing fewer patrols in the South China Sea or West Philippines. I mean, these are the kind of arguments that these people are making just a year or months before getting appointed to very top positions. So let's just call them isolationist folks, right? I don't want to put any more labels on that. I just find it fascinating that there are people who are openly saying, oh, Philippines, sorry na lang ha, kunin namin yung mga weapon system na, mag-usap. And like, this should be worrying. With the combination of Trump also saying all of those things, let's make a deal. So, how do we make sure that we hedge against worst case scenarios? Of course, we have to wish for the best, work for the best, but what are we doing to make sure that we're not over-dependent on the United States and don't end up as a pun in what some of these folks are calling a cooperation spiral rather than a deterrence logic when dealing with China?
Well, Richard, the U.S. has been an isolationist country twice in history, before World War I and before World War II, and they could be isolationists again. And that's really the fear there, that they will say, okay, we'll agree with China to divide the world. President Xi has offered the U.S., let's divide the world. The first island chain will be, everything within the first island chain will belong to China, and beyond that, the U.S. And, Trump is a deal maker. We don't know how he will decide eventually, although we have a lot of friends in the State Department, in the U.S. Congress, Senate, and House, and the military. But the decision maker is something we really don't know, because remember, Trump said just before he assumed office, said we cannot blame Russia for invading Ukraine. What if tomorrow Trump will say we cannot blame China for invading the Spratlys? So we really don't know. So how do we react to this? How do we respond? We have to strengthen our external defense. There's no other way. We have to strengthen we have to modernize the AFP, and that's why we're questioning why Congress chopped off 15 billion from the AFP modernization fund and put it in the flood control of DPWH. We have to strengthen our, because at the end of the day, we can only rely on ourselves. The U.S. might become isolationist. So we have to have deterrence, just like Vietnam. They have 6-kilo class submarines, they have fighter jets, they have anti-ship missiles. Of course, they cannot beat China in a war, but they can give China a bloody nose, and that is enough for deterrence. That's what we want, deterrence only. Right now, we don't have that deterrence yet. So we have to spend more on AFP modernization to achieve that deterrence. Because we don't know really what Trump will do. Because Trump is threatening to withdraw from NATO. If he can withdraw from NATO, that's a mutual defense treaty of the U.S. with Europe. He can also say, we'll withdraw from our mutual defense treaty with the Philippines. He can do that also. If he can do that with Europe, with more reason he can do that with us. So we have to be prepared for that day.
Right. To be fair, I don't think even Trump knows what Trump wants. So, the theory is the last whisper in his ear, but I don't want to go down that road. AFP, Colonel Padilla, what is the Philippines doing to make sure na hindi tayo hostage sa whims of whoever is occupying the White House, whether it's Trump, whether whoever is next? Because as a sovereign nation, we have to have a say, right? And what the heck we're going to do about our own national interests. The reason I'm saying this is because as we speak, although just for transparency purposes, it was the former Biden National Security Council people who tagged me with this one. Oh, yung mga magre-replace sa amin, ganito. And the next thing I know, even my Republican friends were saying, check out some of these guys getting in. So shout out to some of our friends there. But the reality is that, parati natin pinag-usapan yan eh. There are alliances that are important, but at the end of the day, as a sovereign nation, you call your own shot. You have to protect yourself. What are the things we have been doing and what are the things we should do, aside from the fact na hindi kaltasan yung budget from 50 to 35 billion? That's 30%. Yeah.
Yes, no. Ano naman dyan is hindi tayo dependent on one particular nation for anything. What we do, even in our rural missions, no, we do it independently despite offers for some nations to help us conduct it. No? So over and above that, while all of these things are happening, no, we are modernizing, we are strengthening our alliances, upskilling our personnel. No? So makita niyo dyan yung mga kasama sa ating mga balikatan exercises, how we upskill our personnel, no? Yung skill sets nila, integration and interoperability with yung mga capabilities ng like-minded nations. So we have also our RAA with Japan. No? Itong huling balikatan exercises, which used to be US and Philippines lang, last year, we had active participation of the French Navy, and Australia was also there actively participating. No? And different countries who were there as observers are now signifying intentions to also have active participation in the different exercises that we hold. So we are not dependent on one particular nation for all of these things. No? Lumalawig itong ating cooperation with like-minded nations and well-meaning nations, because at the end of the day, all of us wants the same goal, no? To have and maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. And a lot of other countries are now showing actively that they're into this one goal with us.
And in fact, maybe just in the same way in Europe, there's discussion about them shouldering their own burdens more, the Germans and the French. Maybe the effect could also be our allies in the region will also step up. It's not like Japan or India or small players or Australia. These are trillion-dollar economies. So I think before pushing the panic button, we have to realize that yes, China is big, but there are also other players who are not small. And some of them are even bigger than China potentially, like India down the road. Okay, Yusek, from a National Security Council point of view, how are we, I don't want to use the word hedge because we're an ally with the United States, obviously, but how are we making sure that our options are not circumscribed by the whims of wouldn't be nice if we have just peace with China, we'll solve all the problems together. Like, how do we make sure we're not confined to those kinds of...
Siguro, Richard, let me answer that question by first saying that we are at the early stages of the Trump administration. No? It's very early. No, we're still trying to, even the people in the State Department, even the people in the Pentagon.
And of course, if you can also say something on the 90-day freeze on the aid, yes.
Even the American public, they're also trying to find out, navigate through the new administration. So I think this is just part of the adjustment period. No? But what's very what I think what I must emphasize is in the early stages of the administration, or like 2 days after the oath taking, Secretary Manalo and Secretary Rubio had this very important phone call. That's right. And here in this call, Secretary Rubio underscored the U.S. ironclad commitment. No, I was not really expecting this early. Because if you remember, this ironclad commitment really was utilized by the Biden administration. So it's now being used by Secretary Marco Rubio. So that really shows the continuity of American support and, as I quote, ironclad commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty. And both parties also talked about advancing security cooperation, talked about expanding economic ties and deepen access for regional cooperation. And this was followed by another meeting between Defense Secretary Gibo Chodoro and the new National Security Advisor Mark Rhodes, wherein they also talked about strengthening the alliance between the Philippines and the United States. So I think if we base our assessment here, it really shows the solid foundation of the U.S.-Philippine alliance. No? And it would be too early for us to speculate on what this might be. Now, talking about how the U.S. deals with NATO, really, President Trump's issue with NATO is about the contribution of member nations into the cost of NATO, because the United States is the one paying for the large chunk of NATO expenses. So what Trump wants is, since we're providing this security umbrella, you have to step up as well, because the cost to the United States is enormous, and he would like to devote these resources to the American citizens, to domestic.
So logically, are we in a position to tell Trump, you stand with us because we're doing our part?
Exactly. And I think we have shown to the United States that we have been ramping up also our defense spending. We now have a very clear comprehensive archipelagic defense concept, which really requires enormous sums of money into the investment into Philippine defense, to military spending or security spending. So if we follow the logic in NATO, wherein he's asking the NATO members to devote more of their resources, I think 3% of their GDP to defense, we're also doing the same, spending a lot of money to be able to continue the Rehorizon 3, which is now focused on external defense and territorial security of the country.
You say, in short, you're saying we're not in the same boat, we're not even in the same lake, because when it comes to Trump's concern with Europe, it's a completely different situation from ours. Because here in Asia, we're doing our part.
Exactly.
And that the foundations are strong and bipartisan. Just to be clear, the 90-day freeze, what kind of aid does it affect? Does it affect foreign military financing from the U.S.? Does it affect other kind of defense aid agreements we have? Ano yung mga apektado dyan? And by the way, freeze lang yun, hindi ibig sabihin mawala yan, di ba? Yeah.
Kasi there are two documents that came out of the White House. The first one from the United States government. The first one is the executive order issued by President Trump, and the second one was the memorandum issued by Secretary Rubio. And the one by President Trump it's still unclear. It's a bit ambiguous on what is the extent of the review being done. So even if we talk to our friends in the United States government, they're still trying to find out exactly. No? But my understanding is that it does not cover things like Balikatan. It mostly covers development assistance to the Philippines, in particular the USAID projects in the Philippines. So anything funded by USAID, anything funded by the State Department will undergo a 90-day review. It doesn't mean that these projects will not continue. It's just that the President Trump wants to make sure that all of these projects are aligned to U.S. foreign policy. And if we base this on the discussions that we've had with U.S. leaders, members of the Trump administration, as I mentioned earlier, is that in my opinion, all of the projects that the U.S. are doing here are aligned with U.S. foreign policy, especially the question of does this assistance strengthen the United States, or does it make the United States more secure? And I think all of their projects here make the United States more secure.
I think probably it also has to do with the cultural wars and issues there. Maybe Trump administration is just making sure yung pera hindi na pupunta sa mga woke projects, as they call it, right? It's not really about, MAGA, we don't care about the world. So you're saying it's not an isolationist thing, it's just kind of a reassessment of some basic alignment in terms of America's spending abroad, because this is taxpayers' money for Americans, so it should be understandable. Again, I'm saying this because we have friends who are making mountain out of this. And sinasabi na, paano na yung mga budget ng mga bayaran
Ayan.
ng Amerika? Yung mga,
Ayan po,
may mga
balita.
nagpapatawa. Sabi, kamusta naman China? Medyo nag-shrink yung economy. Baka naman. Last point.
Okay,
and then I wanna open it up.
mag-plugging muna ako sa ating mga
Commander Tarila, of course,
superstar.
your PhD was from Japan. Philippine Coast Guard has absolutely great relationship with Japan. Japan played a very important role in modernization of our Coast Guard. What do you have to say about the other important players in light of the fact that we had an RRA ratified with Japan, the French are coming in, and I think people forget, actually, a lot of our modern weapon systems are not American, they're Koreans, they're Indian, Israeli, you get what I'm saying? So I think people forget that actually we are very diversified already in terms of our defense acquisitions, and also in Coast Guard, how much helpful other countries are against, aside from the US.
Thank you, Richard. But before that, I would like to share my optimism muna, for this Trump administration. I think people has already forgotten that the first time that they clarified the Mutual Defense Treaty that is also covering South China Sea was during the time of President Trump and having Secretary Pompeo as a Secretary of State in 2019. That was the first time that the U.S. government clarified that the Mutual Defense Treaty can be applied in the South China Sea. So, Trump has been like that since Trump 1.0 during his first administration. So ngayon, he can say whatever he wants, but with the cabinet members that are in place right now, and I'm also a believer that United States is a mature democratic country. There are democratic institutions in place that will not allow the U.S. government to, deteriorate from being protector of the rules-based order that we all enjoy. And, without going into details, kasi ali si Justice Carpio, I would also like to highlight that the transparency effort of the Philippine government is also anchored in protecting our interests na hindi tayo dependent sa isang bansa lamang. The transparency initiative that we're doing is to create awareness to the international partners who are protector of the rules-based order. We have to make sure that across Europe, Japan, Australia, and the entire world, to include India, that there is this one country that is intentionally and blatantly violating the international law. I've always been mentioning this. The transparency efforts allow the international community to understand that our fight in the West Philippine Sea is not just for us Filipinos. It's not just for our own sovereignty. It is a fight for everybody that wants to preserve the rules-based order. Otherwise, we're going to go back to the system before the First and Second World War that might justifies whatever actions that they can do. And that is what we're doing right now. The mere fact that we launched transparency efforts 2 years ago, marami ng bansa ang nakipag-ugnayan sa Armed Forces of the Philippine Coast Guard, to deepen our security cooperation and to support our modernization efforts for the military. We can now hear from Germany, France, United Kingdom, and Canada as well. Even the Indian government is also supportive of our efforts. And that's another positive impact of the transparency initiative.
Beautiful. Thank you for that clarification and a more positive note under the Trump 2.0 administration. Now, because Justice has to go a little bit ahead, the rest will still stick around a little bit. Siguro yung mga ibang kaibigan natin sa media, if they have questions that has to do with the legal aspects of the West Philippines disputes, or even the strategic aspects, are there any questions or any reactions? Or
Yeah, I think we have to
Helicopter po kasama doon, pasahero po ng
be more strict in registering late birth registrations with the
kailangan mo yun
with the
sa
register of civil registrar.
Santa Cruz, no?
If there is a late registration, it should not be the sole authority of the civil registrar to approve it. It should go to, let's say, DOJ or some other body, just to make sure that there is a counter-checking mechanism, because you've seen a lot of late registrations that turned out to be fake, and as that's the entry of a lot of Chinese aliens getting Filipino citizenship. So I think that has to be strengthened. It cannot be the civil registrar himself who will decide that this late registrant should be approved. It has to be another body just to counter-check.
Okay. Sino pa pangasukin, no?
For that, no,
Okay,
ang
ito,
intelligence is,
malakas din.
when there is
Okay, si
smoke,
Senator
there is
Bongo, no?
flame. So we do not
Okay.
downplay any report that is given
Naglalaro
to the
po
armed forces of the
ay
Philippines.
pangalawa, pangatlo.
Ang AFP is just one of the
Okay,
players
sa
in this.
kasalukuyan
So if we look
na,
at this, we have to approach it in a whole of
pagka-senador, no?
government
Parang agaw pa ito,
approach.
number one.
So if you look at all of
Okay,
this
Senator
malign
Bongo,
influence, all of this
Kaya sinabi ko,
parts and bits and
Sino
pieces that
ito?
form
Pero,
part of a grand plan, tulong-tulong
mahalaga
ang
po
lahat-lahat
ang
ng iba't
kanyang
ibang
nanay
ahensya
ay
rito.
taga
So tinitingnan natin dito,
Batangas.
katulad nitong huling
Okay, mga
national nga na
kilala natin,
iniimbestigahan natin, he
Mayroong
got
mga
his citizenship
tindahan po ng
because he
mga
married a
boutiques dyan sa
Filipina.
Makati.
So
Arcade
nasa
dati.
batas kasi din
Okay, yan ang
natin yun,
negosyo
no?
nila,
So
mga
yun yung
Filipiniana,
nagamit
no?
for legality of that. So
Filipiniana,
what we
yung mga
look
damit
into
pang
on the side of the
Filipiniana.
AFP are
Magandang
national
damit po,
security
mga native
implications.
clothes.
So yun sa side
Gusto,
namin. That's
mga
why
antique.
we are fortifying our
So, yan
units
po
to
ang
have
kami.
this
Bongo.
intelligence command and
Okay,
cyber
sama.
command. Kasi nga, ito na yung modern warfare that we're facing. So we also have to marry yung
Batangueño,
efforts ng
Masuki.
ating AFP
Ayan.
into the
Although
contemporary
tatay niya
modern
Hinsik, mayaman dyan
challenges
sa
that we
Davao.
face. So ito,
Pero
hindi
okay
kaya
lang.
ng AFP ito
Kaya
lang,
Chinoy.
but together
Mix
with
kasi
all
tayo,
other
Masuki,
agencies.
no?
Kasi nga, Bureau of Immigration,
Ayan,
kasama
nandito
dito,
nga,
no, di ba?
solid,
Pati
no?
nga po yung mga
Itong si
birth
Senadora.
certificates and all, they're all part
Okay,
of this.
princess
So,
natin.
hindi siya
Okay, Senadora po
isang part lang po ang AFP to this. No? So
Ilocos.
we have to have great
Sa angkan
alliances
po ng
also
mga
with the
Marcoses,
different
no?
agencies on
Kahit
this.
naman mga
And
Marcoses,
for
mayroon
this,
din mababait mga
nakita
suki,
natin
no?
na naging mapanuri na nga
Okay,
tayo
hindi
ngayon
lahat ng
as we keep
Marcos ay
saying
masama.
that
Isa
security
itong,
is everyone's
itong,
responsibility. Hindi lang
Marcos,
din
itong
government
si
ito, but bawat
Senadora.
mamamayang Pilipino.
Okay, I'm
So
Marcos, no?
hindi
Nakita
namin
nyo naman na pag,
maisantabi na malaking tulong
stand
po
niya
yung
po dyan
reports
po sa
na binibigay
Senado, no?
ng ating mga
Talagang
kababayan
pinupunan
for
niya
us to really closely look into
yung
this.
mga
And
AKAP,
kung meron mang report na
kahit
matanggap ang AFP,
Okay.
action na namin ito.
Ano pa isa?
There's a disproportionate focus based on our intelligence that
Mike.
certain demographics are being targeted.
Ano pa ba yung
Should
isa?
we work with community leaders there? Because
So,
as we speak, there are community leaders who are saying, "Oh, don't target us and all." So maybe the logical solution is let's just work together so that it doesn't come off as if we're targeting the whole community. We're just trying to look at the rotten apples
Mag-ingay
here and
po
there.
dyan sa Senado, no?
Yes or
Yan
no?
po ang
So
kailangan
this is
natin.
all part of this, no?
Sa
So
Senado,
yung Transparency
okay, pag
Initiative,
hindi-
sa amin sa
meron yung
AFP
mga
po, we
tama,
came up
ginawa
with
ng
our
pinsan
communications
nila.
plan.
Okay,
No,
si
meron
Martin
tayong
Romualdez
plan
po
mula.
ng,
So kasama yun,
Kamara.
we really go down
Mag-ingay
to the levels of even
si
our
Jaime
fishermen,
Marcos, no?
kinakausap natin yan.
Mag-ingay
Kaya
talaga.
nga, itong mga part ng
Okay.
drones ngayon, nire-report na
Walang,
nila. No? So through all of
walang
this,
break.
yung huling lumabas was
Kung
a
anong gusto
previous
niyo
incident pa.
sabihin po, mga
Dahil
sabihin
nakita
sa
nga niya na
publiko.
ito na malaking usapin
So,
na
yan
to.
po
Na
ay
yung dati,
kailangan
hindi
natin
naman
mga
nila
tao po sa
nire-report
Senado.
because these are small incidents
Okay,
lang.
hindi ka meme,
Ngayon, they also
hindi-
see a bigger picture to this. So mas
hindi
malawak
po
na
ay-
rin yung understanding ng
hindi
bawat
magsalita, no?
Pilipino, no?
Gusto
And yung
natin
concern
na
nila to be
talking
part of this.
senator, mga
So ang gusto
suki, no?
talaga din natin dyan is to
Okay, para
ignite
sa interest
the
ng bayan
patriotism of the Filipino and the
Ayan, sino pa?
nationalism of every
Ay, ito,
Filipino
maingay rin
to
dito
be
sigurado
part
mga
of
suki,
this
no? Saan ka
this
naman ng mga
conversation
Aquino?
as
Kaya
a whole.
ipag-mix natin mga kababayan, no? Saan ka naman ng Aquino?
Sorry, Philippine Coast Guard.
Okay,
And
unti-unti po
another
humila
question.
pataas. Okay, mag-improve ang kanyang rating. Itong si
Sasaki
Ma'am
from the
Aquino,
Kyoto
no?
News, Japanese.
Okay, marami rin ang grupo
I
ito.
wish to
Political
ask
group.
Sa unang tanong
Mayangkan
tungkol
po
dun
ng
sa
mga dilawan, sabi
ah,
dati ng mga suki, no?
insidente sa
Yun
Palawan,
ang alam,
yes.
pagkamali nila,
We have been coordinating
una
very
si
closely with our
President,
intelligence
Cory
services,
Aquino,
with the
Mamaya
Philippine
pang
National
President.
Police, the National Bureau
yung
of
cordon
Investigation, and
sanitaire ba?
all
Yung family
law
cordon
enforcement
sanitaire, yun ang
agencies of
kamali nila,
government.
no?
Gaya nga
Dapat
nung sinabi ko
noon by
kanina, because there will be announcements
nakabawi
here
na sana tayo,
in the next
kundi
few
yung mga
days.
suki,
No?
no? Hadlang, barrier.
Well, siguro what I can say right now
Administration po ni
is
Cory
that
Aquino.
there will be more arrests.
Bigyan pa ng chance ulit.
And this includes
Mabuti
what
na
happened
kagawa
there
ng
in
kapatid
Palawan.
kung paano po itong anak nila, no?
Because we have
Na
ramped up
mayapang Noynoy
our
Aquino.
counterintelligence efforts.
At least,
And because of that, we're slowly
meron kahit
unraveling
paano nagawa, mga
the
suki, no?
conspiracy,
Meron din
no?
mga
This
kontrobersya.
operation
Pero,
that being
ganun
done
lang talaga.
by foreign
Okay,
actors
sa tuwan na lang ngayon, ang
to
problema po ay
conduct espionage in the Philippines.
too much corruption.
Ayoko lang
No?
pangunahan ang National Bureau of
Pagpatago ng
Investigation
pangalan.
and the
Yun ang
Department of
pinaka-problema
Justice.
natin dito sa
But
kasalukuyan,
yes,
no?
we are aware, no?
Sa
In
Marcos
fact,
administration.
we are part of the team that's looking into this, and that
na
we
walang pupuntahan.
expect more arrest in the coming days, because
Kaya nga,
you know when you have this type of
Okay,
individual arrested,
so
this leads
yan
to
po
another
ang
individual,
ano.
to another individual.
Okay, ito
Because
palaban
these are
po
all,
mga suki ay magsikap.
sales, so to
Okay,
speak.
talagang
Okay. So the other question,
todo kayot po
the
itong
Typhoon
si
missile system, I think
Attorney
the
Vic
Philippine
Rodriguez,
government
no?
has made very clear
Okay.
its position that
sana yan
the presence of
ay
the
makaupo
Typhoon
po
missile system in the
sa
Philippines
Senado, no?
is
Malaman
part,
natin ng
was
mga
part, of course, of the Balikatan
Okay,
exercises.
kapalpakan
So
po
the
ng,
purpose of that
dating
was
amo
to
niya, mga suki, no?
train
Okay.
Filipino
Yeah,
troops
Attorney
in
Vic
utilizing
Rodriguez.
this. It is not for offensive purposes.
Yan
It
po
is
ang national
primarily for
figure
defensive
po.
purposes and to ensure
Ay, tinagurian
that
ko
the Philippines
superstar po sa
has
Senado.
capacity to
Ang mga tao po
operate
nandito
such
dito.
weapon system. And the Philippines
balikan po
has
natin
expressed
ang,
its interest
local,
to buy these
sandali
types
lang.
of systems. In the same
Okay,
manner that we bought the
ipapatuloy
BrahMos
natin
missile system, in the same
analytico
manner
po
that
ng,
we're getting
mga
other types of weapon
kapwa natin
systems.
media po
The
tungkol
Typhoon
sa
is just one of those
itong problema
tools
po
that
ng
we can use to strengthen our comprehensive
Israel at
archipelagic
saka
defense concept. And very clearly,
itong
it is for defensive purposes.
Palestine mga suki.
So, as mentioned by the armed forces,
Kaya balanse
this is
tayo
a sovereign act. This is a decision
news.
of the Philippine
Yun naman
government, and
sinubukan
it is
natin
not
pag
meant
news
for
nga.
any
Kailangan
other
balanse.
state. It is for the territorial integrity of the Philippines.
And quite rich for China to talk about nuclear war as well. They're nuclear submarines and they're doing intercontinental ballistic missile tests last September. No, but from the AFP perspective, and then I want to go also to Justice Carpio on this big question.
Puro question din ng mga tao ito. Parang ako rin ba, puro question.
all part of the comprehensive
Puro
archipelagic
magtanong lang
defense concept.
araw-araw po sa inyo mga suki.
What we do in terms of fortifying our defenses is a sovereign act of the Philippines. And kasama lahat yan is all interconnected to one another. Our CAD-C is connected to our modernization projects. It's connected to the laws that are being passed, yung lumabas na about our archipelagic sea lanes, our SRDP. So lahat po ito is all connected to one
Okay,
another.
sa amin
So
kasi kailangan malakas ang opinion.
whatever we do
Sa trabaho namin
in terms
ito,
of fortifying
kasi
our defenses
pinapakinggan po ng,
is for us
halos
to determine
yung mga
and to
leader.
put into play
Ako nga,
without
abot hanggang
any
Washington, DC,
external
mga Pilipino.
entity
Hanggang White
dictating
House.
how we would do it.
Naabot ang
Justice Carpio, how do you see the whole Typhoon
Kailangan kasi malakas
drama?
ang opinion ko.
Do you think the Philippines should push for acquisition of those weapon systems? Do you think we're making the Chinese rightfully nervous about this? What should be the big grand strategy on this front, if I may say?
Well, we're just following what China did to the U.S. The Chinese, to prevent the Americans from sailing in the South China Sea, they developed their Daofeng DF-21-22 missiles, and that would target the aircraft carriers 1,000 kilometers away. And that is the asymmetrical defense. Very expensive to have aircraft carriers, to develop aircraft carriers. So with this far cheaper missiles, you can deter the aircraft carriers from entering the South China Sea. We also cannot manufacture warships. They're very expensive. It's cheaper to have BrahMos missiles or Typhoon missiles to serve as deterrent. This is a matter of deterrence, really. We cannot hope to invade China with this. We cannot hope to defeat China with this. We can only hope to deter China with this. And that's really the reason for this. Simply deterrence, not to intimidate China, because China's nuclear bombs, you cannot intimidate somebody who has nuclear weapons and you don't have. You will be wiped
Okay,
out.
gusto ko lang
So
mag-comment
this
sa
is
Iran, no?
purely
Tingnan nyo Iran ngayon,
deterrence.
tahimik.
That is how China
Tahimik
should
po ang Iran
see it.
ngayon, no?
We're just defending.
But Justice, there was a question: should we eventually
politika
push the
sa Iran,
Americans to
medyo
extend their
tahimik po
nuclear
ang
umbrella to
Iran,
us,
no?
or maybe it's too early to go
Okay,
that
kaya
far?
kung
Because
totoo,
that's a big
ma-achieve
debate in
nila
Japan,
ang,
from what I understand from
nila
conversations.
sa mga
Well,
nuclear,
that goes already with the
meron
Mutual
nuclear
Defense Treaty,
capability,
because
may nuclear bomb.
if there is a nuclear
Okay,
attack on us, then the Americans
ay, na-achieve
will
nila
be
yun.
obliged legally to
Ay,
support us, and the only
isa
way
po
to,
ay
under international
maging
law,
superpower po sa Middle
you have
East,
to
no?
retaliate
Okay, kaya
with the same
tahimik sila.
force that was used
Okay,
against you.
naalala
So if it's a
komentary
nuclear
ko kay
attack, you can respond by a
Muhammad
nuclear
Marami,
attack.
dapat
That's
magkaroon po
automatic
ng,
under the
normalization
Mutual
ng
Defense
Iran, no?
Treaty. It's
Makipagkaibigan.
because Mutual defense means you can respond proportionately to the gravity of the attack.
Are there other questions?
Sa negosyo, no? Sa ekonomiya. Okay, para makabawi sila.
We more proactively call out certain questionable behavior, perceptions, narratives, because I think we have to be honest that I mean, the Philippines is for me in a kind of a double Cold War, right? One is we're caught in between US and China, but the other one is that there are two major coming elections. I know China competition and Duterte administration, or Duterte versus Marcos kind of competition as we head into these elections, because my sense is this could be the first election whereby TikTok will play a very important role. We saw that in the US with the swing voters going for MAGA. We saw that in Indonesia with Prabowo's elections last year. But also I think this is the election where we'll see a lot of discussion on West Philippines issue. We're already seeing surveys, no? Na boboto ba kayo sa mga pro-China candidates? We never had surveys like that before, right? Now we can have even, so that means that the tenure, the cadence, the trajectory of conversations is getting more serious because we're in a very serious situation. I think people are not realizing what's happening to us is not just normal espionage activities. This is like Berlin of the 21st century. I don't want to scare people, but I think we have to realize we are at the very front line of big tectonic movements in terms of geopolitics. Justice Carpio, maybe some final notes on that, and then also what are the things we should do moving forward, especially with elections coming in and things getting very hot in the Philippines. Yeah.
Well, there is only one country in the world that is invading us using use of force or threat of force, and that's China. It's invading our maritime zones, it's invading our island territories in the West Philippine Sea. And there is only one country that is able to support us, to help us deter China, and that's the US. So it's very clear where we should ask for help, who should be our ally in this epic struggle to defend the West Philippine Sea. So, and in the Philippine context, you have families here. One family is allied with China, another family is allied with the US. That is how it's being played now. So, at the moment, we are forced to ally ourselves with our former colonial master, because our colonial master has no more territorial or maritime designs on our territory. It's China that has territorial and maritime designs on our territory. So I think the choice is obvious. We have to defend
problema po ng
maritime
kaibigan
zones
natin
and
for
our island
former
territories.
President
That's
Barack
the
Obama
first
ngayon, yung picture po
obligation of a
sa
state to defend
YouTube
its
po,
territory,
pinakita po ng,
because without territory you don't have a state.
Mga magandang dilag, no?
And that's the way I look at it. We
isang
really have no
follow
choice.
people,
But
at saka isang
at this
team
point,
na
to
magandang mga
have the
kababayan,
US as our ally,
Okay,
because it's the
nakita
only
ko sa picture.
nuclear-armed country that's willing to defend
paano
us
nakuha
against
mga. So,
a
kaya
nuclear-armed
delikado
China.
talaga.
Thank you.
So avoid false
Sa buhay
equivalence. Just
natin, mag-ana-ana
quick point,
ang susunod,
Justice
no?
Scorpio.
Makuhaan ka ng picture,
Obviously,
mag-ana-ana,
you know,
wala na.
you and I have not
Tapos
been
ka na.
shy of being critical of
Nakuha ng
governments
picture
throughout
na
different
napakasusunod.
administration. Even when you were inside government, you were
Former
critical.
President Barack Obama,
I think
kasamang babae, no?
in media, in academe, we're always
First
trained to be,
Lady Michelle Obama.
basta kung anong position ng government, dapat we have to check it to balance it.
hindi Okay,
I'm not saying that we shouldn't criticize the government, but do you think it is also important for people to realize that we need to have, I hate to use this word, unity more than ever, right? Considering the urgency of the situation we're facing. That's why I use the term whole of nation. Whole of nation doesn't mean that we'll just be okay with whatever happens with the government, but whole of nation is also this basic understanding na may mga bagay kung saan talaga dapat magsama-sama tayo, and may mga bagay na talaga you have to have private-public partnership, and civil society has to work in tandem. I mean, this conversation is very much multi-sectoral, right? Not only interagency. What do you have to say about that, Justice? Because you're the most experienced person here. You have straddled government, civil society, and academe throughout the years.
Well, as I said, I think the government now, the incumbent administration, is on the right path, right policy as far as the West Philippine Sea is concerned. I mean, we just have to tweak some of the strategies and the tactics, but it's on the right path. We have to assert the arbitral award, we have to defend our island territories, And we have to strengthen our alliances with the U.S. and like-minded states. And we must invite our allies to sail in the West Philippine Sea, because by sailing the West Philippine Sea, they're actually enforcing the arbitral award. And we are on the right track, but we have to tweak some of these things, because like for example, in arbitration, there's a reluctance to file an arbitration case now. We have to convince the government to do that. Thank you.
So proactive. Commodore Tariela, final word?
Okay, na-achieve na nga nila ang pinakamayaman sa daigdig with their combined assets.
Minsan nagugulat ako kay Richard pag biglang ako na yung tatanungin, sir. Well, I think West Philippine Sea is the most unifying issue that we have right now. And the 2025 midterm election, para sa akin, this will be a litmus test on how unified the Filipinos are when we talk about the West Philippine Sea issue. Noong mga nakaraang eleksyon, we never ask accountability among the candidates how they stand or how they view the issue in the West Philippine Sea. But because of the transparency effort of the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, under the leadership of General Eduardo Año, we were able to awaken the sense of patriotism ng ating mga kababayang Pilipino. They were also asking like how ordinary Filipinos can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. I think this coming election, this is the best way that you can support our fight in the West Philippine Sea. We have to make sure that those members of the legislative branch that we're going to elect, whether in the Senate or in the Congress, are those people who will be supporting President Bongbong Marcos in standing firm with his commitment of not surrendering a square inch of our territory to any foreign power. Huwag na tayong magboto ng mga kandidato na pro-China at susuporta at hindi susuporta sa modernisasyon ng Armed Forces of the Philippines at ng Philippine Coast Guard. It will be very difficult for the AFP and for the Coast Guard, for BFAR and other government agencies to support our annual budget kung ang ilalagay natin sa Kongreso ay ang mga miyembro ng Kongreso at Senado na never really cared about our fight in the West Philippine Sea. So, the most important and patriotic contribution that you can do for our fight in the West Philippine Sea are elect members of the legislative branch will be supporting our government in not surrendering a square inch of our territory. Thank you.
Mr.
Parking premise is our right is our right. So ang sabi nga ni
Si Trump
Jay,
po ay window of opportunity,
ang
no?
uniting
Sa
factor ng
maraming bagay.
Filipinos ngayon is the usapin ng
maraming
West
bagay
Philippine
sa
Sea.
kapayapaan ng
And with that,
Ibig
no,
sabihin, no?
as we shift from the AFP, from the internal security
Talagang
operations
totoo
to
siya.
territorial defense,
Ay, siya
ito na
po.
yung nagiging focus natin.
Window
When we
of
say
opportunity.
territorial defense, it's not an outside entity coming in,
Makakabuti po
but
sa
we're looking at the
daigdig
Trojan
kung
horse
tuloy-tuloy po ang
inside
ginawa niya.
and trying to look at
Kapayapaan
kung
ng
ano yung mga different factors that contribute to a greater grand plan,
Okay,
no?
politika
Kung ano
kasi
lahat ito. And as the election season comes in,
politika at saka
no?
ekonomiya
Ito
po
may
makaganda ng
malaking
daigdig, no?
usapin dyan, is our
Magandang
farm
leader,
elections, which is a
magandang,
historical feat for the Philippines.
Okay,
And
leader
we're
sa
looking at
politika,
any influence
magandang
that will
ekonomiya,
that will ano no
magandang
hamper
mga
the peaceful
Yun po
conduct
ba
of
siya?
this. So kasama lahat yan
Go
sa
ahead.
lahat ng tinututukan natin. And
Continue.
with this, bawat mamamayang Pilipino, parte tayo dyan as we exercise our constitutional right to have our voice be heard and have a stake on who will be leading us into our future, no? Ito lahat, we do not lose focus on the bigger challenge and the bigger picture out there. Kung ano man itong mga nangyayari internally, let's look at how it is connected to the influences that they have with the bigger challenges we have. And as one Filipino nation, no, kung ano man yan, pinupush natin
Okay,
na for
napasensya kayo,
the
no?
rest of
Nakafocus
this,
ako sa
ano
ngayon
natin,
ay
no,
sa
mga
geopolitics,
kababayan
no?
natin na nalihis
Pasensya
ng
kayo.
landas to come to
Ang
back to the
local
force of the law, and
minded kasi,
together we fight a bigger
medyo
challenge, which is territorial
lalo na
defense.
abandon mo
And
na
so,
po ang local
ang
politics.
laging binabanggit ng
Focus
AFP po
tayo sa
dyan is,
kapayapaan po
ito po
ng-
ang ating karagatan, ito ang ating karapatan, at ito ang ating kinabukasan. This is our seas, our rights, and our future. So alamin natin ito, atin itong ipaglaban, at atin itong suportahan.
Yusek Malay?
Ako, actually, Tariela for Senator. Matagal ko na itong sinasabi eh. And medyo disappointed ako nung dumaan yung filing ng candidacy. Hindi nag-file ang aking senador.
Tulis ito mga
So, pagpasensya na natin at ang postcard na lang siya.
Tulis.
For now. Well,
Hindi determinal mga ito.
just very short lang naman to. I just want to thank the Filipino people for the overwhelming support. 84% of the public in the latest Okta survey show that 84% of the Filipino people support the Philippine government's position in asserting our rights in the West Philippine Sea. And as you mentioned in the bakit hindi 100%, it's because we're not a authoritarian state. We are a democracy. And 84% sa ibang bansa, napakalaki na niyan. No? Sila, meron na silang 55%, 56%, tuwan-tuwa na sila. That's already a vast majority. But us to have 84% in one of the largest countries in the world, no, with a large population, to have that kind of critical mass supporting government is a really big thing. And that is because of people like you, Richard, no, and my colleagues here in government who continue to fight the good fight for God and country. Maraming salamat.
For the Palestinians is this
Thank you very much.
which we just got done describing in detail. Where does that leave the future of this ceasefire and the future of Gaza?
So, look, there are elements, there are factors that if you look at them, you say the ceasefire will hold, and there are factors that if you look at them, you say the ceasefire won't. The biggest factor is cloud.
Courtesy of our RJD.
Biblia ang sasagot, itanong mo kay Soriano. Ang kapayapaan po ng Diyos Ama at ating Panginoong Jesucristo ang sumainyo. At magandang araw, magandang gabi, anumang oras sa inyong lugar na kinaroroonan. At kami po ay muling nag-aanyaya sa inyo. Samahan nyo kami sa loob ng ilang oras ng ating pong pagtatanghal ng Ang Dating Daan Worldwide Bible Exposition. At atin pong bibigyan ng pagkakataon ang ating mga kababayan, ang mga panauhin na makapagtanong ng iba't ibang mga bagay ng pananampalataya sa kapatid na Eddie Soriano. Para po hindi na tayo magtagal, minsan pa po ay aming pinagkakaloob sa inyo ang kapatid na Eddie Soriano. Kapatid na Eddie, magandang araw po sa inyo.
Magandang araw po sa lahat ng ating mga kapatid, panauhin, mga kaibigang dumalo dito sa ating Bible Exposition. Unang-una po ay alam naming hindi madaling mag-anyaya sa tao dahil sa ating panahon ang relihiyon ay nagiging isa pong kabiruan o isang object of ridicule sa mga ibang tao dahil sa nasasaksihang mga iba't ibang gawaing mali sa mga relihiyon sa ating panahon. Yan po ipinagpauna ng Biblia doon sa 2 Pedro, Kapitulo 2 at versikulo 3. Pisahan natin sa 1.
Ngunit may nagsilitaw din naman sa bayan ng mga bulaang propeta, na gaya naman sa inyo ay magkakaroon ng mga bulaang guro na magpapasok sa lihim ng mga makakapahamak na mga hidwang pananampalataya na itatatwa pati ang Panginoon na bumili sa kanila na magtataglay sa kanilang sarili ng madaling pagkapahamak at maraming magsisisunod sa kanilang mga gawang mahahalay na dahil sa kanila ay pagsasalitaan ng masama ang daan ng katotohanan.
Dahil doon sa mga bulaang propeta, mga maling relihiyon, dahil sa kanilang masasamang gawa, pagsasalitaan ng masama ang daan ng katotohanan. Ang isang katotohanan po, mga kababayan, meron talagang katotohanan. Meron talagang sa Diyos. Pero marami pong kasamaan, kakumpetensya yung sa Diyos. Naglalaban po ang dalawang ito eh. Yung puwersa ng Diyos at yung puwersa ni Satanas. And sa mundo, mas nakararami po
tapos na po ang
umapanig sa masama. Kaya dahil doon sa kanilang ginagawang masama, napagsasalitaan ng masama, pati yung daan ng katotohanan. Kasi majority yung gumagawa ng masasama. Pakinggan niyo po sa 7 ng Mateo, versikulo 13.
Tapos
Kayo'y
na.
magsipasok
Okay,
sa
plugging
makipot
na lang
na
tayo, mga
pintuan
super. Sandali
sapagkat
lang,
maluwang
mag-plugging ako
ang pintuan at
sa mga
malapad
local
ang
candidates,
daang
no?
patungo sa pagkapahamak at marami ang dooy nagsisipasok sapagkat makipot ang pintuan at
Ayan,
makitid
hindi ko
ang daang
nakita po ang,
patungo
for you,
sa
no?
buhay.
kung ano-anong masasama.
Pero maraming mga
Kaya-
lugar yan na pupuntahan mo. Malalapad ang daan at maluluwang ang pintuan. Ganon din sa
wala
mga
na, no?
relihiyon. May
Wala
mga
kayong
relihiyon
magpaalam natin
maluluwang.
ba pagkatapos ng...
Walang bawal, kahit
Okay.
anong gawin mo,
Ano na ito?
pwede. Walang bawal. Pero ang sabi ng Panginoong Jesus,
Grabe.
makipot ang pintuan. Makitid ang daang
Okay,
patungo sa buhay.
pag-plugging muna kayo ng parang
Kakaunti
programa,
ang
haba-haba na yung na-consume natin.
nakakasumpong noon.
Sabi ng
Kung
House
ikukumpara
Manager
natin
po,
doon sa mga
ay tama
nakakita
na,
ng masasamang
no? Kasi meron tayo House Manager
mga
po
bagay
mag-control
sa
dito.
buhay, mas kakaunti
Kasi
yung
pag ako hindi
nakakita ng
ko-control po ang
mabubuti.
bunganga
Kaya
po dito
po,
sa programa.
sa ating
So,
panahon,
kaya,
makikita
mag-advise.
natin ang halos
Okay, tama na.
napakaraming tao. Kung
Okay,
ano yung
mga
masama
suki, mga
yung
kababayan,
gusto,
yan, plugging
Yun
natin
po ang
sa
ating
local
layo na
candidate natin.
ang tao
tapusin
mahikayat
muna ang
natin
Jensen,
doon
no?
sa kabutihan.
General Santos City.
Kaya lang, alam namin
Okay,
na pagdating sa
Ronald
paghihikayat,
Tuwalibera,
pag-aanyaya, pag-iimbita,
Incorporated, no?
mahirap mag-imbita.
partido po ng local
Nagpapasalamat
dyan sa
kami
General
at
Santos.
dumalo kayo mga
And then
kababayan.
meron silang...
Kasi alam namin sa panahong
okay,
ito,
meron
ay ang
silang,
mga tao dala na sa mga relihiyon.
kandidato, no?
Sabi ni San
Okay,
Pedro,
kandidato
napagsasalitaan
Ang
ng
kandidato
masama
nila?
ang daan ng
Okay,
katotohanan.
itong si...
Sabi ng
Okay, Indasher in Banyas.
alam namin na
Okay,
maaaring
isang,
dala na rin kayo
okay.
o kaya ay may mga duda kayo.
Hindi Ilocano, no?
Inayayahan
Ilonggo
namin
po
kayo
mga suki,
magsuri mga kababayan sa sandaling panahong ating pagsasama-sama.
So, anong posisyon na tatakbuhin niya? Isa rin sa mga
Baka
superstar po ng
makatulong kami sa
kandidato
inyo.
natin.
At
Ang
baka
tinatakbo po
sakaling
ni Sir Rin Banyas.
maging
Okay, ay
daan para magkaroon tayo ng
pagka-Lord District po
interes
ng
na umalam ng
sa
talagang
House of
katotohanan.
Representative, no?
Welcome
House
po kayo
Representative.
sa ating programa.
Okay,
At
pagka-congresswoman
umaasa po kami
masukin,
na
ng
magiging
Lord District ng
kapaki-pakinabang sa inyo.
So, tandaan po,
Umpisa na tayo, kapatid na
yung
Daniel.
naabot ng
Opo,
network
kapatid
ko.
na Eli, at ready na ang Doha
Si
Qatar
Sir
sa
Banyas
pamamagitan po ng
Morales, no?
kapatid na Efren Baking.
Si Sir
Go ahead,
Banyas.
Doha Qatar, please.
Maraming salamat po sa Diyos, kapatid na Daniel, kapatid na Eli. Ang magtatanong po dito ay si kapatid
Sino ang
na
kasama niya?
Alberto Tan, isang
Okay,
Katoliko,
itong,
at siya po ay 39 anyos na.
magaling
Kapatid
din
na Alberto, go ahead po.
politiko. Okay, itong
Gabit,
si Nanay,
araw po talagang lumalapit
Nunez.
sa ating Panginoong
Tita
Diyos
Nunez,
Ama
no?
at sa kanyang
Ayan.
bugtong anak na si Jesus.
Superstar din diyan sa Jensen, mga suki. Puro
Sa
superstar
akin
ang mga
pong
kandidato po.
paglapit,
Okay, sino pang
lagi po
superstar?
akong nagsa-sign of cross.
Okay, pagka-vice, si Attorney Ed Yuman,
Yun po
no?
ba
Isa
ay
rin superstar po.
dapat po ba sa
Kandidato
ating
natin yan,
paglapit,
Sir
kailangan po
Santos.
bang mag-sign of cross?
Itong mga kandidato ito, no?
Alam mo,
So, sinong,
kapatid na Alberto,
party- kaninong
salamat
party
sa
yan?
iyong pagdalo.
Okay, former
At
mayor,
salamat din sa iyong tanong.
RCRI.
Kakaroon ako ng opportunity
okay,
na
Rona,
maiparinig yung
Chula
aral ng
Rivera,
Biblia sa
Incorporated
mga
Local Party.
taong bukod sa iyo.
So, sino sa babawan nila?
Unang-una yung
Okay,
sign
isa-isahin
of
na
the
lang, mga
cross.
kababayan.
Wala sa Biblia yun.
Ay uniform.
Alam mo, kaya nga mayroong
Pinangunahan po
Biblia.
ni
Yun
Jane
ang
Rivera,
batayan natin
Barban Consul,
ng
at saka
paglilingkod
May
sa
mga pastor
Diyos.
pa dyan eh.
Lahat kasi
Kalimutan
ng
ko yung
gagawin
pastor na
natin, mayroong batayan.
Okay,
Mayroong
naalala ko
definite
po
na
kahit sa
batayan.
amin. Doon
Pag-aaral
sa
ka ng batas, ang pag-aaralan mo
Okay.
yung Book of Law.
So, yan po
Maaring
ang
national, local, o international
isa
law.
sa mga binanggit
Mag-aaral ka
natin
ng
programa. Halo-halo
inhinyero, Meron kang pag-aaralang mga aklat, yung
Okay,
mga
then
batas
this
ng
Sambuanga, huwag
physics,
natin
at saka yung mga batas ng
huwag
matematika.
natin kalimutan, no?
Kasama na rin
Okay,
yung
dito sa
1 plus
Sambuanga.
1 equals 2, 2 plus
Okay,
2
sa
equals 4.
second district.
Ayun.
Okay, ito ko si
Merong mga
Kuya.
batayan lahat yan. Merong
Kuya natin
definite
po, mga
na
aso, kasi daw
karunungan
mag-aaral sa atin.
ang
Okay,
abugasya.
doon sa
Pag nag-aaral ka ng abugasya,
sa
meron
Radel-
kang,
sa Kwan,
ang mga gobyerno,
University
meron
of
silang
Manila.
itinatadhanang
Okay,
mga
ito
aklat
si
na pagbabatayan
Abe's to
ng
Robin, mga aso.
karunungang ituturo sa
O
estudyante
Ibn to Robin, Ibn
ng
Hajar to
alinmang
Robin.
sangay ng karunungan.
Okay.
Ngayon,
Talagang
pagdating
kung
sa
sa education
relihiyon,
lang, qualified yan na
98%
paghawak po ng kapangyarihan
ng
po
lahat
konsehal,
ng
no?
naniniwala sa Diyos nagbabatay
At saka,
sa Biblia.
Maalam ba? Maraming alam po mga
98, 95, o palagay mo ng 90 nang naniniwala sa Diyos. Mayroon
Siya rin
kasing
eh,
mga
magaling
taong
po
hindi
ng,
naniniwala sa Diyos eh. Yung mga
communicator, no?
ateista,
Okay,
yung mga libre pensador, yung mga free thinkers, hindi naniniwala
Wala kang
sila sa
matawaran
Diyos.
kanya, no?
Pero yung mga
Okay, so
lahat ng naniniwala
yung
sa
plano
Diyos,
niya
pagsama-samahin mo,
mag-independent
90% ron, Biblia
Okay,
ang
sa
ginagamit
District 2?
na batayan.
kayo mga
Ngayon,
sa District 2,
Ang Biblia,
kung sino
ginagamit
makarinig
na
ng programa
batayan
natin,
sa instruksyon ng
ilagay niyo
Diyos
sa
na
puso
kung
niyo,
mag-aaral
sa
tayo
listahan,
ng pananampalataya,
ang
dapat
kaibigan ni Mr. Robin,
yung
no?
batayan natin
Para makapagservisyo
nakasulat
publiko,
lahat.
diyan
Walang
po sa
galing
konsehal
sa
ng,
utak ng ministro.
Siyudad ng Sambuanga.
Dapat
Ang
nakasulat.
Okay,
Basahin
lipat
natin
na
ang
po dito sa District
4:6 ng
1.
unang Korinto.
Okay, dati nang
Ang mga bagay
sir,
ngang ito, mga kapatid,
na
ay
program natin ang
inianyo ko
performance
sa
niya.
halimbawa sa
Okay,
aking
itong
sarili
si-
at kay Apolos dahil sa inyo,
Okay, babae, no?
upang sa amin
Okay, itong
ay
si
mga tuto kayo na
Vice
huwag
Mayor
magsihigit
ng
sa mga
kasalukuyan,
bagay na
incumbent pa.
nangasusulat
Pinpin
upang
Pareha,
ang
no?
sino man sa inyo
Wala
ay
nating
huwag
kalimutan
magpalalo ang isa laban
kung,
sa iba.
Pansin
meron
mo
kay
yung
kandidato
salita ni
iba?
San Pablo.
Basta kasama
Upang
po
sa
niyo
amin
ang kandidato
ay mga
natin,
tuto kayo
itong si Pinpin
na huwag
Pareha, no?
magsihigit sa mga bagay na nangasusulat.
Doon lang tayo
Ang
makabawi.
disiplina ng pagkatuto
Pag-elect natin mga leader, no?
kung alin yung
Ayan.
nakasulat.
So, Pinpin Pareha,
Ayun.
no?
Dapat kung
At saka
alin
ito,
ang
isa
nakasulat,
ito, konsehal, mga
yun ang
super
paniniwalaan mo.
Okay,
Yun
si
ang
Vladimir
matututuhan mo. Kasi
Jimenez.
yung nakasulat,
Ayan,
yun ang
ng District
utos
1.
ng Diyos.
Bigyan natin ng
14:37 ng unang
Okay, para
Korinto.
ma-prove niya,
Kung iniisip
Galingan
nino
niya
man
po
na
sa
siya'y
konseho
propeta
ng,
o ayon sa Espiritu,
Zamboanga City, no?
ay kilalanin
Ang
niya
unang
ang
pangusap.
mga bagay na sa
Vladimir
inyo'y isinusulat ko na
Jimenez,
pawang
isang,
utos ng Panginoon.
Pakaliwanag, ang isinulat
abogado
ng
po,
mga
Mas,
apostol,
okay, no? Licensed
utos
abogado.
ng Panginoon.
Okay.
Kaya nasulat yan, yun ang
Ayan.
pinasulat ng Diyos sa kanila. Samantalang
Yun ang
sila'y
gusto ko,
tinuturuan,
kasaysayan ba,
ipinasusulat
yung
ng Diyos sa
kanyang
kanila, yung dapat na
katulad po,
informasyon,
galing po working
aral,
students,
salita, karunungan, kaalaman na itatawid sa tao. Gumamit ang Diyos ng instrumentong mga tao para sumulat. Unang-una si Moises, isang prinsipe si Moises, prinsipe sa Ehipto. Kinilalang
Parehas ang
anak ng
kasaysayan
anak
natin.
na babae ni Paraon.
itong
Kung
si
matatandaan nyo
Vlad
yung
Jimenez,
Ten Commandments.
isang abogado,
Si Moises ay
at
inampon
sikap mag-aral.
ng anak na babae ni
Okay,
Paraon,
working
tinuruan
students
sa
po ng
Ehipto.
Ateneo ni
Isa siya sa mga tao na
Bihira yung mga
propetang
ganyan.
tinawag ng Diyos, kinasangkapan
Okay,
sa
naging
pagsulat
abogado.
ng nakasulat sa
Kanyang
Biblia.
pagsikap po.
Tapos tumawag
Sa
siya ng
kanyang
mga
pagpunyagi.
propeta, sumulat din
Ay,
sila Isaias, Jeremias, etc.
Sabihin, may
Tapos sa
tangking
panahon
talino,
ni Kristo,
Mahirap pa
tumawag
tayo
siya
maging
ng mga
abogado.
apostol na
Kaya,
pinasulat ni Kristo ng kanyang mga aral. Sabi ngayon ng mga
Blood.
apostol,
Attorney
kung
Blood.
mag-aaral kayo,
District 1.
matuto kayo sa
Okay,
amin,
ganun din eh.
wag
Punta na
hihigit
tayo
sa
sa probinsya
nakasulat.
namin ng Basilan.
Dapat
Okay,
kung
sa
alin yung
District
nakasulat, yun ang
Okay,
matutuhan natin.
ganun din.
Pag hindi nakasulat,
Consistent.
hindi kasama yun
Okay,
sa
malakas
dapat
na
nating
umasuki.
tanggapin. Kasi hindi
Walang
yun ipinasulat
kadida-duda.
ng Diyos eh.
Okay, si Moving Road
Hindi
yan,
yun
yan,
sinabi ng Diyos. Alam nyo, sa
veteran
mundo,
na
ang isang totoong dapat
politician po sa
maintindihan
amin.
ng tao. Sa
Magmula
mundo,
bata
mga
pa
kapatid,
hanggang
maraming
matanda na.
katha.
Okay, itong si
There are
Ronnie Hantian,
so
no?
many inventions sa mundo.
Sa Kupuang Tabuan Lasa.
7:29
mainland
ng Ecclesiastes.
Narito, Ito
Kung sa
lamang
mga
ang aking
kamag-anak ko, yung,
nasuntungan na ginawang matuwid
maniwala
ng
pa rin sa
Diyos
akin.
ang tao.
Diyan po sa
Ngunit
Jimain
nagsihanap sila
clan.
ng maraming katha.
Okay.
Ayun, maraming katha
Incoming
ngayon eh.
po ng reunion.
Mga imbento,
Okay, huwag nating kalimutan
hindi
po
nakasulat sa Biblia.
si Ronnie Hantiano.
Halimbawa, ang imbento
Okay.
ng pastor, ano?
Bigyan
Yung Trinity.
natin na priority
Wala naman
para
sa Biblia yung
makapag-serve
salitang
ulit mga
Trinity eh. Wala
Ayan.
yun. Yung
Okay,
Santa
ganun din sa
Cena,
District 1. Ay, sako po
yung
ang
banal na hapunan daw,
ang
tapos may
District
abulo
2,
yan.
tatlong
Wala sa Biblia yun eh.
munisipyo ng, munisipyo po
Ang
ng,
nasa
Albarca.
Biblia, hapunan ng Panginoon,
Albarca,
hindi Santa
ng
Cena.
tipo dati.
Hapunan
Albarca
ng Panginoon.
Municipality, yung Kayapukan.
Eh yung hapunan ng
Saka-
Panginoon,
saka
pinalitan nila ng banal na hapunan,
dating,
tinawag na
original po ng
Eucharist.
munisipyo.
Ano?
Itong tipo-tipo
Wala
pa,
naman sa
no?
Biblia yung inimbento
Ayan.
na yun eh. Na
And then,
Eucharist,
sakop niya ang Mitan
na
City.
papakainin ka,
At saka dating
tapos
tuburan,
hindi ka
no?
papainumin.
Ajul,
Meron ba namang pagkain
Akron
walang
Municipality.
inom? Kakain,
At kung
iinom.
meron
Ba't
pa ibang
ikaw hindi ka
municipality
pinainom?
dyan,
Eh, ang sabi ni Kristo,
Ayan.
kainin, tapos uminom.
Huwag natin kalimutan
Talagang
po.
natural yung pagka kumain, iinom.
Huwag
Eh
natin
bakit yung mga
botohan po.
pinakaing membro hindi
Itong si
pinainom? Kulang. Wala sa nakasulat
Ronnie
yon. Kaya kailangan
Ang
matuto
probinsya
tayo, wag hihigit
Okay,
sa nakasulat.
wala na akong na-miss.
Ibig
Punta
sabihin
tayo
nung
ng
wag
District
hihigit sa
1, ay
nakasulat,
ganun din.
eksakto.
Okay, matino.
Kung ano talaga
Mabait.
yung nakasulat, yun ang matutunan
Masipag lang
natin.
po mag-farmer.
Hindi
Okay,
mahirap
magpapagay
ngayon
po ng
hanapin
mga,
sa Biblia. Meron ng computer
farm
kasi.
niya, katulad ng rubber
Tingnan mo, pagka
plantation,
nag-ano ka sa
rubber,
Facebook,
rubber industry,
bilyon-bilyon ng tao sa
rubber
Facebook
farming,
no? Pero
at saka
pagka
ibang
nag-click ka
mag-alaga
ng
ng mga
pangalan, agad-agad nakikita
alabaw,
yung pangalan sa
mag-alaga
Facebook
ng
eh.
mga baka,
Ganon
kambing.
din sa Biblia.
Ano pa itong si
Napaka liit ng Biblia
Ahmad.
kung ikukumpara
Smile, no?
sa record
So,
ng
sa
bilyon-bilyon tao sa mundo
Huwag natin
ngayon
kalimutan
na
po.
gumagamit ng internet
Okay,
at saka
patuloy-tuloy lang
Facebook.
ang kanyang serbisyo.
Bilyon-bilyon ng tao sa
Public
internet
po sa
eh. Pero madaling makita.
Muslim province,
Kaya
no?
sa Biblia, madali
Kanyang
mong
distrito
makita
ng
ngayon.
District 1.
Meron bang sign
Anong
of the
sakop
cross?
niya? Isabela City. Rich,
Tingnan nga
voting,
natin, kapatid na
population po
Luz,
ng,
pahanap mo nga sa
Isabela
computer
City.
kung ano ang sasabihin
And
ng
then itong
computer.
dalawang lang taon,
Opo, hanapin
mayaman
natin
din sa
ang
boto.
sign of the
Okay,
cross
yung mainland at saka
sa
island,
English
no?
Bible, sa
So,
Do I Reigns
let's
version,
smile.
from Genesis to
District one.
Revelation, result,
And then,
no
dinagdag
word
natin
or
kasi
phrase found.
tag
Kung
sa akin
nakikita
itong
mo
si
yan, kapatid na
Marisa Akbar, no?
Alberto, yung
Marisa
Do
Akbar,
I
huwag
Reigns
natin
version
kalimutan.
ng Biblia, yan
Okay.
ang Bibliang Katoliko
Itong si
mismo.
Marisa Akbar, no? Bigyan
Yan ang
natin
ginagamit ng
pagkakataon po
Katoliko, kaya dyan natin
from,
hinanap. Yung palang sign
Akbar
of the
clan, political
cross,
Akbar clan
wala
po.
pala sa Bibliang Katoliko
Nag-observe din
mismo
sa
eh.
Basilan, no?
Eh tignan naman
Yung mga
natin sa
panahon
ibang
namin.
Biblia.
Okay.
Sa lahat na ng Bibliang
Akbar, no?
Ingles,
Ayan.
meron bang tinatawag na sign
So,
of the cross?
yan po
Kapatid
ang
na Luz?
mainland, no?
Hanapin po uli
Ay,
natin
bigyan
in
natin po
all
ng,
English translation.
Priority sa
Let
listahan.
us search
pagdating
for
ng
sign
halalan,
of the
no?
cross from Genesis to
And then
Revelation,
last na po talaga sa
result,
sumisid.
no
Okay, ganun
word
din.
or phrase found.
Okay, ito
Ayan, ang
Diablos na
sabi ng
kasalukuyan, no?
computer,
Wala
Di
natin
pala
yung
naman
trabaho.
nakasulat yung sign of
Bigyan
the
natin
cross
ng
eh.
trabaho role ulit.
Eh, paano mong
Okay,
gagamitin
pa
yun?
sasabunan pang
Alam mo
bayan.
kung ano yung sign of the
Okay,
cross,
itong si Ustad
kapatid?
Muad Samlur, no?
Basahin natin,
Pagtulong-tulungan
kapatid na
natin.
Daniel, yung Discourses
Okay,
on the
makapasok po.
Apostles' Creed
Okay,
na
bilang,
isinulat ni Reverend Clement H. Crack
sangguyan
sa
bayan po ng
pahina
sumisid, no?
17, kapatid
Okay,
na
mga
Daniel.
Jimain clan.
Ito po ang
O,
sinasabi
wag
ng
natin
Discourses
kaligtaan po.
on the Apostles' Creed
Tulungan
by
natin
Reverend
itong,
Clement Crock, page
Kapwa
17.
natin sumisitiyan.
Saint Teresa states that Satan
itong
had
si
no power over the
Amlur,
cross,
Ustad.
nor over any object over which the sign of the cross has
Sukatin
been
yan, bakit
traced.
sukatin?
It is the Christian's strongest and most
Okay,
powerful
and then itong
weapon
last na,
against
last but not the
Satan.
least.
Ayon daw
Okay,
kay
itong si
Santa
Omar
Teresa,
Ataman, no?
eh hindi naman
Okay,
apostol.
ganun din. Yan po
Hindi
ay
naman
dugong
mangangaral ng
Jimain
Diyos
yan,
yun.
no? Okay,
Ang sabi
at
raw ni
dugong
Santa
Ataman.
Teresa,
Ayan.
yun daw sign of
Jimain
the
at
cross,
Ataman
yun daw
combined.
ang strongest and
Okay.
most powerful
Pero bibigyan
weapon
natin pagkataon
against
po
Satan.
mag-serve.
Yung
Okay,
pala,
Sangguniang Bayan po ng
eh
sumisid.
panlaban kay Satanas yung sign
Okay,
of the
tapos
cross.
na. Tapos
Yun
na
ang sabi ng
lahat.
libro.
Tapos
Eh
na rin
bakit
ang
pag
balita
nakaharap
natin,
ka
mga
kay Santa
kababayan.
Maria, nagsa-sign of the cross ka?
Mamayang hapon naman
Eh
tayo
Satanas
magbalita
pa si
kung
Santa
anong
Maria.
pwede natin balita.
Medyo yata may mali. Bakit? Abe, panlaban pala kay Satanas. Ba't mo naman sa harap ng estatwa ni Maria, eh, magsa-sign of the cross ka? Bakit pagpasok sa simbahan, Yun pala'y panlaban kay Satanas yung sign of the cross. Bakit ginagamit mo sa harap ng altar? May Satanas ba sa altar? Mag-isip ka, kapatid na, ha? Ito pa ang panalangin, hindi namin ito inimbento. Ito'y isinulat sa maikling katisismo, kapatid na Daniel.
Ito po ang maikling katisismong pahina 3, may nihilabstat ni J.C. Abreu, imprimatur ni Hernando Antiporda, printed and published by Catholic Trade, Manila Incorporated. Ang tanda ng Santa Cruz. Ang tanda ng Santa Cruz ang ipag-adya mo sa amin, Panginoon naming Diyos, sa mga kaaway namin.
Ang tanda pala ng Santa Cruz, pang-adya sa kaaway. Magkapareho. Yung sinasabi ni Santa Teresa raw, na yun ang pinakamabisang panlaban kay Satanas dun sa Apostles' Creed, at dito naman sa katisismo ni Hernando Antiporda, yung palang tanda ng Santa Cruz o sign of the cross, pag-aadya sa kaaway. Kung pag-aadya sa kaaway, mananalangin ka sa Diyos, ba't ka naman gagawa ng sign of the cross? Bakit pagkakain pa mo tumulog sa lamesa? Nagsasign of the cross. Pang-adya pala sa kaaway. Kaaway mo ba naman yung pagkain? At meron pa akong nakikita halimbawa, nakasakay sa jeep o sa bus, nung nagbubusap ng jeep, pag natatapat sa simbahan, nagsasign of the cross. Ganun ka ako, yung pala'y pang-adya sa kaaway, yung pala'y panlaban kay Satanas. Pagtapat sa simbahan, dali-daling nagpupuros. Magulong aral yan kasi wala sa Biblia. Mag-isip ka, kapatid. Hindi naman sa akin galing yun galing sa libro nyo. Kaya ako naman kinuha sa libro nyo ang sagot dahil wala naman kasi sa Biblia. Diba? Kasi hindi nakasulat sa Biblia na pag nananalangin, mag-sign of the cross ka. Wala, no? Wala naman sa Biblia. Di hahanap ako ng ibang impormasyon. Nakita ko sa librong Katoliko yung palang sign of the cross. Pang-adya sa kaaway, panglaban sa kaaway, at pinakamabisang panlaban kay Satanas. Sabi ko,
tulong dito sa programa natin.
Mali talaga.
Okay, Mr. Dama.
Sana naunawaan mo, kapatid na Alberto.
Palawan Expenses. Okay, BBP. Okay, huwag na nang bagitin natin.
Salamat, ang kanawa ng Panginoon, kapatid.
Okay,
Lipat naman po tayo agad sa Giginto, Bulacan. Nandun naman po si kapatid na Danny Davales at kapatid na Rick Terese. Giginto, Bulacan, go ahead please.
Opo, salamat po sa Diyos. At ang magtatanong po dito mula sa Giginto, Bulacan, kapatid na Eli, kapatid na Daniel, ay si kapatid na Corazon Reyes, San Katoliko, taga Bongbong at 61 years old. Ito na po si kapatid na Corazon.
Yan po ang tulong-tulong po sa programa natin.
Ano po ang ibig sabihin ng
sa programa kung gusto niyo maraming malaman mga
salamat po sa pagdalo, kapatid na Corazon. Ang una, yung po salitang Antikristo, ang salitang anti kasi kalaban
tulong po binigay sa atin, no?
Gaya nung antibiotic. Kalaban nung
ano po ang global network natin?
Kalaban ng mikrobyo, kalaban
tulong
ng
talaga sa programa. Kaya itong programa po ay
mga bakterya.
Hindi magsarado.
Yun ang antibiotic.
Okay, hindi magsarado. Dahil
pag sinabi po antikristo, ang ibig sabihin po sa Biblia noon, kalaban ni Kristo.
Huwag naman kayo
hindi naniniwala at hindi sumusunod kay Kristo. Mula pa ng una, marami na po yan. Basahin natin ang unang buwan, 2:18.
Bumunting mga anak, ito ang huling oras at gaya ng inyong narinig na darating ang Antikristo. Kahit ngayon ay lumitaw ang marami ng Antikristo. Kaya nga, nalalaman natin na ito na ang huling oras.
Nung malapit na po matapos ang unang siglo ng siglong Kristiyano, nung first AD, ay sinabi ni San Juan, anyo 98 po nang isulat niya yan, more or less Sabi niya, mumunting mga anak, ito na ang huling oras. Gaya ng inyong narinig, darating ang Antikristo. Kahit ngayon, sa panahon ni Juan, buhay pa si Juan Apostol, lumitaw ang maraming Antikristo. Kaya nalalaman natin na ito na ang huling oras.
So hanapin natin
Kaya
exit
hindi
sound,
pa po tayo
exit
pinanganganak, may mga
Exit
antikristo
program, mga
na.
suki sound.
Alam niyo po kung ano yung mga
Nagbulog ako,
antikristo.
mga kababayan, no?
Basahin natin dyan din sa unang
Dami
Juan
pa magtulong dito sa programa ko, no?
2:19.
Sila'y nangagsilabas sa atin,
Hindi po biro.
ngunit sila'y hindi sa
Kaya
atin.
umabot ng 14
Sapagkat
years.
kung sila'y sa atin, ay nagsipanatili sana sa atin. Ngunit nangagsilabas upang sila'y mahayag na silang
Kaya wala
lahat
nang kung
ay
sinasabi,
hindi
mag-gera
sa
tayo,
atin.
mag-insight ng
Yung
sa programa
palang
ko.
mga antikristong tinutukoy ni Juan,
Hindi
yung
ako
mga
mag-insight.
humiwalay sa mga
At saka hindi ako
apostol,
mag-tridor po.
yung nagturo
Gumagawa ng mga
ng ibang
patriotic
aral sa
trabaho
itinuturo
po rito
ng
sa
mga
programa ko, no?
apostol, yun pala ang mga
Puro sumunod
antikristo.
tayo po sa salitang
Kaya ang
batas
tagubili ni Juan
at sa
mismo
kabandila natin, mga
sa mga
kababayan, no?
kapatid, pagka
Ayan
may
po ang
dadating
sumpaan
sa
natin.
kanila na hindi yung aral nila ang itinuturo,
Hindi tayo
antikristo yon, wag nilang
magutos o
tatanggapin
magkagulo
sa
kayo.
bahay. Sabi
Hindi
niya dun
po.
sa ikalawang Juan
Minsan
1:10.
referee tayo, no?
Kung sa inyo'y dumating ang
Okay,
sino
sa
man
kabungan.
at hindi dala
Lalo na po
ang
sa
aral
Pilipinas.
na ito, ay huwag ninyong tanggapin sa inyong bahay at huwag ninyo siyang batiin, sapagkat ang bumabati sa kanya ay nararamay sa kanyang masasamang gawa.
Ayon, ang sabi sa mga Kristiyano nung una, pagdadating sa inyo yung antikristo, magtuturo ng ibang aral, iba
Okay,
sa
salamat na
itinuro
lang
ng mga apostol,
contribution dito
huwag
sa
niyong
programa
tatanggapin sa
natin.
inyong bahay at
Marami
huwag
naman
niyo
tayo
siyang babatiin. Sapagkat ang bumabati sa kanya, nararamay sa kanyang masasamang gawa. Kaya yung pong antikristo, panahon pa ng mga apostol, may naglitawan na. Lalo na sa ating panahon, marami pong antikristo. Yan po yung mga kalaban ni Kristo. Kaalay ni Kristo, hindi sumasang-ayon kay Kristo. At meron pong mga antikristo na ang misteryo ganito. Kunyari, sinasabi nila si Kristo rin, pero antikristo sila. Sinasabi nila si Kristo rin, pero antikristo sila. 24:4-5 ni Mateo.
At sumagot si Jesus at sinabi sa kanila, "Mangag-ingat kayo na huwag kayong mailigaw ninuman, sapagkat marami ang magsisiparito sa aking pangalan na mangagsasabi, Ako ang Kristo, at ililigaw ang marami."
Kita mo kapatid, hinulaan ni Kristo, merong magsasabi pa na siya ang Kristo, pero ililigaw ang marami, antikristo rin yan. Kahit na sinasabi pa nila Kristo, pero nagliligaw naman sila, kalaban din sila ni Kristo. Sabi ni Kristo, mag-ingat kayo, sabi niya sa mga unang Kristiyano, marami ang magsisiparito sa aking pangalan. Magsasabi ako ang Kristo, ililigaw ang marami. Mag-ingat kayo na huwag kayong mailigaw ninuman. Kasi ang mga antikristo, yan ay ang mga magliligaw, babaguhin ang aral ni Kristo,
Okay, hanggang dito na po,
magtuturo
mga
ng ibang
kababayan.
aral. Basahin natin
So, there you
ang
are,
unang Timoteo
100%.
6:3.
Kung ang sino may nagtuturo ng ibang aral at hindi sumasang-ayon sa mga salitang nakagagaling, sa makatwid ay sa mga salita ng ating Panginoong Hesukristo at sa aral na ayon sa kabanalan, ang gayon ay palalo, walang nalalamang anuman, kundi may sakit sa mga usapan at mga pagtatalo, sa mga salitang pinagbubuhatan ng kapanaghilian, mga pagkakaalit, mga pag-alipusta, mga masasamang akala.
Yung mga antikristo, sabi ni San Pablo, yung nagtuturo ng ibang aral, hindi sumasang-ayon sa salitang nakagagaling. Sa makatwid ay sa mga salita ng Panginoong Hesukristo. At tinan nyo ha, mula pa nung una meron ng antikristo. Ang salita ni Kristo, kinokontra nila. Eto, papakita ko sa inyo isang halimbawa. Oh. Sa Mateo 23, ang sabi ng Panginoong Jesus sa 9, ganito.
At huwag ninyong tawaging inyong ama ang sinumang tao sa lupa, sapagkat iisa ang inyong ama. Sa makatwid bagay siya na nasa langit.
Sabi ni Kristo, yung tunay na Kristo, ano po? Yung Kristong nakausap ng mga apostol. Huwag kayong tatawag ng ama sa kanino mang tao sa lupa. Pagdating sa relihiyon, ipinagbabawal po ni Kristo tawagin mong ama ang sino mang tao sa lupa. sapagkat iisa ang inyong Ama. Sa makatwid bagay, siya na nasa langit. Kaya ang turo niya, manalangin kayo ng ganito, Ama namin na nasa langit ka.
Sabi po ng
Kaya ang tatawagin nating Ama, lalo na sa pananalangin, yung Amang nasa langit. Huwag tayong tatawag ng Ama sa sino mang tao sa lupa pagdating sa relihiyon. Ulitin mo nga kapatid na Daniel 23:9.
At huwag ninyong tawaging inyong ama ang sino mang tao sa lupa, sapagkat iisa ang inyong ama, sa makatwid bagay siya na nasa langit.
Yung tawag na Ama, hindi dapat itawag yun sa tao sa lupa pagdating sa relihiyon. Yung Ama, pwedeng itawag yun sa bahay. Yung tatay mo, yung biological father mo, yung talagang asawa ng nanay mo, na sila ang may anak sa'yo, tinatawag natin yung Ama ng ating mga laman. Pero pagdating sa relihiyon, walang utos si Kristong tumawag tayo ng Ama sa kanino man. Bawal nga niya alam nyo, sa relihiyon, may nagpapatawag ng Ama. Bawal ni Kristo yun Patawag ka ng Ama Diba? O, basahin natin ang 23:8.
Datapwat kayo'y huwag tatawag na rabi, sapagkat iisa ang inyong guro, at kayong lahat ay magkakapatid.
Ang tawagan sa iglesia, magkakapatid. Huwag kayo kang papatawag na rabi. Iisa lang kasi ang inyong guro. Ang kahulugan kasi ng rabi, plural po yung rabi ng salita.
Ang Antikristo, kalaban ni Kristo. Hindi sumasang-ayon sa aral ni Kristo.
Marami po ngayon ganyan Marami pong ganyan ngayon. Yun lang magpatawag ka ng Ama, Antikristo ka na nun Kalaban ka na ni Kristo. May ideya na kayo, kapatid, kung ano ang mga Antikristong sinasabi sa Biblia?
Opo. At salamat